Chapter 10-12. The darkness was boundless, and only a cluster of light flickered indistinctly at the end of the earth. This was purgatory. Chu Feng returned here again and gazed at the city of death on the horizon. He sighed lightly. After thinking about it for a long time, he still chose this path in the end. For the sake of becoming stronger, for the sake of revenge, he could only choose to leave and enter the world of the living. The path to the world of the living in the ruined universe had long been closed, and he had no way of sneaking over. Right now, this was the only path left. Even though he was conflicted in his heart and wasn't willing to reincarnate from here, he didn't want to abandon the flesh embryo of this world, but what other choice did he have? Right now, this was the only path to the world of the living. Other than this, there was no other way. Even the stone fox didn't have any clues and was helpless. Perhaps letting go of the obsession in his heart was also an extremely good choice. The path Chu Feng was currently walking on was flawed and extremely imperfect. He could use this to correct it and step onto the path of the most powerful expert. I'm still unwilling in the end. Chu Feng sighed. If there was a choice, who would be willing to end their life in this world and start anew in an unfamiliar world? With his current skills, he arrived in front of the radiant city of death with a single step. It was extremely easy. He arrived in the blink of an eye and jumped onto the city wall. The entire city was covered in corpses. Some of them looked like princesses of the imperial family, some of them emitted the aura of supreme experts, and some of them were sect masters. All of them were extremely strong. They continuously fell into the enormous and rough stone millstone that occupied a third of the city, and they were crushed into a bloody paste. Perhaps the Great Abyss is also a path. Chu Feng pondered. He was a bit suspicious. There was something strange about that place, and it might be connected to the so-called Great Een realm. Unfortunately, he couldn't take the risk. That was an uncertain path. The most important thing was that his enemies were in the world of the living, and the people he cared about were also born in the world of the living. Whoosh! With a flash, he arrived in front of the stone millstone and saw all types of corpses. There was even a koan that was being ground to pieces and an undying bird that had turned into a bloody mist before quietly reincarnating. His heart palpitated. The creatures that came and went from the land of reincarnation were truly too powerful. Some races were even legends among legends. Chu Feng frowned. In the future, the stage would be extremely large, perhaps the center of the heavens. There would be many difficulties and hardships, and intense competition would be needed. It was also precisely because of this that he wanted to go over and fight for hegemony in the Yang realm. He wanted to spur himself on to rise and break free from the countless geniuses in the untainted land. This time, it was extremely risky for him to step onto the millstone. This was because he didn't want to protect his fleshly body, but rather grind himself. He had the strangeness, the source of calamity, and dangerous substances on him. The gray fog had accumulated too much in his body, and he needed to use this opportunity to get rid of it. In order to test it out, he moved cautiously. He constantly tried and corrected himself, and only after a long time did he find a balance point that was a distance away from the stone box. With a muffled groan, Chu Feng's physical body disintegrated. In a split second, ghostly wails and divine howls rang out. Large amounts of gray mist rushed out from within his body, turning into all kinds of creatures that howled mournfully and incomparably malevolent. The gray fog was dense, like rolling gray clouds. Within it, there was a six-winged sky dragon howling with blood dripping from its eyes. There was an ancestor-level evolver shivering and wailing incessantly. Chi! Chu Feng's flesh wriggled as he charged toward the stone box within reach. He used it to resist the reincarnation power and the millstone, rapidly reforming himself. He didn't really want to destroy his body. He only wanted to erase the hidden dangers within. Looking at the surging gray mist in the distance, it truly made one's heart palpitate. There was actually so much gray substance in his body? It was much denser than when he saw off the black yak, the yellow cattle, and the Manchurian tiger. The millstone glowed and golden runes flickered as they shot over to suppress the gray substance. Mournful and frightening screams shook the heaven and earth. The gray mist surged, and all kinds of creature phantoms appeared in front of everyone. It was as if an emperor had descended to the mortal world and was sitting cross-legged there, accepting the worship of all living beings and the kowtow of the world's experts. However, that person's eyes were dripping with blood, and his expression was strange. Chu Feng looked on coldly. He held the stone box in his hand and stared at this scene. He had seen it last time, and even though his heart was palpitating now, it wasn't too shocking. When all the gray mist was shaken away, obliterated, and crushed clean by the golden runes, Chu Feng let go of the stone box once more and mutilated himself again to accept the purification. With a muffled groan of pain, he was crushed into meat paste by the coarse millstone. Even his soul light was split into pieces. In this world, this could be considered the extreme torture. Even a noble divine king like Chu Feng was in unbearable pain and felt that it was unbearable. However, he took the initiative to do so. Everything was to eliminate the hidden dangers. Roar! A large area of gray mist appeared, and the roars of beasts rose and fell. This time, he saw all kinds of energy monsters gnawing on a Chu Feng whose eyes were bleeding. The figure in the center of the gray mist had changed. It wasn't like an emperor descending to the mortal world, but like he himself was trapped and being torn apart. He was suspicious for a moment. What kind of messed up vision was this? The millstone glowed and shot out golden runes of order. After the strange substance was wiped clean this time, a bit of gentle light submerged into his reconstituted body. It made him feel much lighter and more agile, as if a layer of mud had been smeared on his body. Something strange. When Chu Feng began his third adjustment and crushed himself again, a lot of gray mist still floated up from the bloody mud. This time, he saw a cage with himself trapped inside. He was covered in blood and shackled as if he was being interrogated. What kind of situation was this? Bang! When the golden light on the stone millstone shattered this part of the strange substance and obliterated it completely, he saw himself in the cage turn into a bit of light and return to his reconstituted true body. This time, he felt that his heart was even more ethereal. It was much faster when he tried to ponder over some wonderful technique. Chu Feng was shocked. This gray substance had entangled him for too long. Could it be that it had blinded his mind? It really had to be completely eradicated now. The influence it had on a person was too great. Just like this again and again, he experienced the most terrifying pain in the world. At one point, he thought that he might as well throw away the stone box and completely crush himself, discarding his corporeal body. He would be like the other reincarnators and only bring along the talisman paper to be reborn. Grinding himself like this over and over again was too terrifying. It was also excessively cruel and truly unbearable. However, Chu Feng persevered. After a dozen times in a row, his corporeal body and soul light turned into fragments. He reconstituted himself beside the stone box, and the gray mist became less and less until it didn't appear at all in the end. Chu Feng didn't dare to be careless at all and tried a few more times. This lasted until a fuzzy figure in the gray mist appeared once again and sneered at him. It revealed a smile that made people feel terrified. Only after it was obliterated this time was it completely peaceful. After that, Chu Feng tried many times. His corporeal body and soul light were shattered and reconstituted again. Only then did he let out a long sigh of relief. At this moment, he had a kind of experience. His body was much more agile and his heart was clear. The speed at which he comprehended various scriptures and secret techniques increased by a large margin. This was like a rebirth. After the hidden dangers were obliterated, His body had transformed and his true self had returned. Without a doubt, this had far-reaching effect. If he really wanted to go to the Yang realm to contend for hegemony, a great obstacle had already been swept away on his road to rise. This thing is really troublesome. Chu Feng had a lingering fear in his heart. He had thrown caution to the wind for the sake of revenge. He had absorbed the divinity granules continuously in the foreign realm for 100 years and used the little 6 rays of time technique, which led to his body fusing with a large amount of strange matter. As expected, a great problem had arisen. If he hadn't used the stone millstone to resolve the future trouble, a great problem would have occurred in the future. He wouldn't have lived for a few hundred years before he would have aged prematurely and died tragically. It's not my soul that's going to reincarnate. My corporeal body has also come over. How can I reincarnate? Chu Feng muttered to himself. He decided to take one step at a time and take a look at the end of this path. If it really didn't work, he could only abandon his corporeal body in the reincarnation cave. In addition, there was also the stone box. Could he bring it along for reincarnation? Something big was definitely going to happen. He felt a bit of a headache, but he really didn't want to abandon the stone box and the 3 seeds. He had a vague feeling that these things were extremely important and couldn't be easily abandoned. This was even more important than rushing to the Yang realm alone. What was the Yang realm like in the end? He was looking forward to it very much. Chu Feng came out from where the crude stone millstone was and officially stepped onto the reincarnation path. He wasn't prepared to turn back if there were no accident. This wasn't the first time he had stepped onto this path, but the feeling he had today was different. This time, he was going to reincarnate himself and set off on his journey. There were too many soul lights on the way and all of them were reincarnators. Chu Feng gazed at them. If this path wasn't naturally formed by heaven and earth but was instead opened up by humans, then the soul lights of the creatures that could reach here weren't simple. Therefore, he decisively carved words along the way and left a soul oath on some people's bodies. For example, he wrote a paragraph of scripture on some people's souls and wrote a secret technique on some people's bodies. He needed a few helpers. The enemies he faced after arriving in the Yang realm were too powerful, and the disciples of the orthodoxy were endless. He was only doing this now to form a good karma and also to make it convenient to swindle them in the future. Of course, he didn't leave his own name. If he continued to carve Chu Feng's name, something big would happen. He didn't know what happened to the group of people who left the words behind back then. He reckoned there wouldn't be any problems during that period of time. When he went to the Yang realm in the future, he might secretly recognize a bunch of relatives. The creatures Chu Feng chose were all especially powerful soul light. Their races were world-shocking and some of them were only legends in myth. He carved words all the way until he finally reached the end of the path. He crossed the black abyss with the talisman paper in hand and arrived at the opposite shore. He held onto the stone railing and looked at the clay idol sitting cross-legged on the rock wall. After arriving here, the talisman paper on Chu Feng's body had already combusted by itself before he could even ignite it. It transformed into a stick of incense and shone here as it burned unceasingly. He had come here more than once and witnessed the process with his own eyes. At this moment, his heart still skipped a beat. How could it spontaneously combust? Chu Feng didn't kneel down like the others. Instead, he looked at the clay idol and was a little doubtful from beginning to end. Did this person still have perception? Perhaps it really was just a statue. It didn't move for hundreds of millions of years and sat in silence. Even if it was originally a living person, it should have died by now. When the talisman paper was about to burn to its end, Chu Feng resolutely turned around and walked towards the reincarnation cave. He was about to start a brand new life. Suddenly, he felt a chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right. He suddenly turned around. What kind of situation was this? The clay idol moved? How could Chu Feng not be shocked? This was definitely a major event that shook the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. What exactly was it that triggered it? Dust surged and fell down in a rustling manner. It was unknown what the origins of the clay idol that had been silent for hundreds of millions of years were. It was unknown whether it belonged to this evolutionary history. No matter how time flowed and the long river of time passed, it was still silent. It sat here quietly as if it was overlooking the common people throughout the ages. Chapter 10:13. Chu Feng felt a chill run down his spine. He had come here several times before and even sat side by side with this stone statue, enjoying the burning symbol paper offerings. He was completely fine. Yet now it was shining. Dust surged and rustled down. The beast's skin sleeves began to flutter about. Chu Feng felt a headache coming on. He had a type of realization. How could one not get their shoes wet if they often walked by the river? He had come here several times without encountering any trouble. Today, something finally happened. He witnessed a great change. Was the clay statue going to settle things with him? He felt a bit lacking in confidence. When others came here, they all worshipped and kowtowed devoutly, but he had never been so respectful. It was to the extent where he even had the thought of stripping off this clay statue's battle robes and taking away its bracelet. Even though he didn't take action in the end and didn't rob it, that type of thought was extremely strong. Now, he really wanted to say, "Buddy, go back to sleep, I'm just passing by." Moreover, he really did it. He just wanted to bite the bullet and slip away. However, an inexplicable field energy appeared and imprisoned him, making him unable to move. Chu Feng released a sigh, his scalp going numb as he looked at the clay statue. Time flowed on, the river of time roaring. After who knew how many millions of years had passed, the dust on the clay statue's body was too thick, long covering its true appearance. Now it was shining. The dust that fell down was several inches thick, especially one of its sleeves. It began to flutter about, the radiance dazzling. The clay statue's movements were truly a bit frightening. This place was normally as lonely as snow, but now dust was flying everywhere, a bit suffocating. Something's wrong. While Chu Feng's heart was pounding, he also noticed a few abnormalities. Everything was because of the clay statue's hand. Its body didn't move, the beast's skin robe fluttering originated from its left wrist. Dazzling light flowed about, symbols rippling, sparkling and resplendent. It was that bracelet. It was formed from beast bones, teeth, bird beak, and other things. They were strung together by some mysterious creature's tendons, forming a beautiful and simple bracelet. At this time, the polished bird beak, beast teeth, sparkling bone pieces, and other things trembled together, releasing radiance. The entire bracelet was divine, auspicious, and incomparably gorgeous. At first, it was like the rising multicolored light of dawn, illuminating all directions. In the end, it was like a divine rainbow that shocked the heavens. It was too dazzling, making it impossible for one to look straight at it. The most important thing was that it possessed a type of supreme might that shook the hearts of people. Even divine kings would feel as insignificant as ants before it, as weak as a speck of dust. They weren't considered anything at all. Chu Feng was sure that if it weren't for the stone box in his hand, he would have been frightened out of his wits and wouldn't have been able to stand here safely. Even if he didn't explode here, his body and soul would be destroyed, he would most likely fall to the ground. In the past, the strongest beings in his eyes were reflectors, and he had no idea that there were realms above that. He had even once thought that this bracelet was made from polished beast teeth and beaks of reflectors. Looking at it now, that kind of conjecture was too laughable. It was worlds apart. This bracelet was definitely an ultimate item that could make all the evolvers go crazy. With the protection of the stone box, Chu Feng gradually stabilized. He didn't tremble, but he felt waves of fear in his heart. He had a feeling that something was about to happen. He looked carefully. This clay idol's body really hadn't moved. Although a lot of dust had fallen, the dust on its true body was still very thick. It didn't reveal its true appearance, and he couldn't even see clearly whether it was male or female, young or old. Only the beast-skin sleeve on its left hand was fluttering. The light from that bone bracelet was too intense. Moreover, at this moment, it violently shot out a multicolored beam of light that flew towards Chu Feng. He simply couldn't dodge it. The beam of light carried the aura of time and was formed from all kinds of great Tao fragments. It was like a divine decree that soared across the sky and enveloped Chu Feng. "No!" Chu Feng bellowed. He felt as though his heart was about to split apart and his soul light was palpitating. It was as though the end of the world had arrived. Did this clay idol really want to settle accounts with him? With a buzzing sound, that beam of light enveloped him. The divine and majestic multicolored beam of light could simply crush everything. It was omnipotent as it confined Chu Feng from head to toe. It surged in a split second. During this process, the stone box was sparkling and translucent, but after a slight tremble, it returned to its original state. It didn't obstruct the beam of light that the bracelet shot over. "I'm just passing by." Chu Feng shouted loudly, but he couldn't shout out. He couldn't move at all, and even his soul light seemed to be frozen. It was like a mountain torrent pouring down in torrents as it surged within Chu Feng's body. The sound was abnormally grand and deafening. It made his flesh and blood tremble and his soul light resonate. What kind of situation was this? All of a sudden, he seemed to have transcended and was able to examine everything about himself. That multicolored beam of light was attacking his entire body from top to bottom. From his blood and bones to his soul, every inch of his body was combed through. After that, Chu Feng saw a scene that horrified him. How could there be two of him? One of them was his own body, and there wasn't a problem. There was another one with bloodshot eyes and a strange smile at the corner of his mouth. It almost overlapped with his own body. He was horrified as he realized what that was at the first moment. The strange substance still hadn't been completely eliminated? Aolo, an ear-piercing shriek was like the wailing of a malicious spirit. It was too horrifying and terrifying. It came from Chu Feng's own flesh and soul and broke the tranquility at the end of the reincarnation road. Yes, Chu Feng himself had a kind of understanding. This stone embryo wasn't simply sitting here with its eyes closed in slumber. Instead, it was guarding this road and didn't allow certain things to step into reincarnation. Although it was deathly still and motionless, it was silently overlooking everything. At the same time, he also understood that it wasn't that the crude stone millstone wasn't strong enough, but rather that his flesh and soul light hadn't been completely crushed all along and hadn't been formatted. He came here with his corporeal body, so there was still the strange substance entangling him. And here, the stone embryo was overseeing things. Regardless of whether it was an inanimate object or alive, that bracelet on its wrist was carrying out some kind of decree. It purified everything and intimidated this road. This was carrying out the final inspection to put an end to the disaster. Chu Feng didn't know whether he should rejoice or be horrified. That strange substance was far more terrifying and complex than he had imagined. Unexpectedly, it still hadn't been completely eliminated and needed the clay embryo to take action. To be precise, the bracelet on the clay embryo's wrist had been activated. It was erasing the terrifying substance here because the gray fog wasn't allowed to appear in the reincarnation. Chu Feng thought. In the past, he still wanted to take this bracelet for himself, but now it seemed that he really was audacious to the extreme. The ignorant were fearless, but he also sighed inwardly. If he could wear this thing on his wrist, he wouldn't have to be afraid of that strange substance. He could use the little 6 rays of time technique to his heart's content without any hidden dangers. Bang! The Chu Feng, that was entangled with his true body, was bleeding from its 7 apertures and covered in wounds. Now, it directly exploded and was completely destroyed by the multicolored light beams shot by the sparkling and translucent bracelet. At this moment, Chu Feng was like a prisoner that had struggled free from a dark cage. His entire body was more than several times lighter than before. This made him feel even more refreshed than after he was purified by the stone millstone. He knew that this time, the disaster could be considered to have been thoroughly eradicated. How terrifying was it to have one's spiritual nature obscured? If he didn't eliminate the gray fog here, how could he contend with the geniuses of the Yang realm in the future? He was congenitally deficient and would become dimmer and dimmer. At the same time, Chu Feng discovered that after the Chu Feng, that was bleeding from its 7 apertures and attached to his flesh and soul light was destroyed, it turned into specks of gray powder and didn't completely disappear. But there was no longer the so-called strange, ominous, and so on. After it was thoroughly purified, it was reduced to a kind of special substance. At this moment, something moved inside his body. It was pulling and absorbing the specks of gray powder at the most basic source. This made Chu Feng jump in fright, but he felt relieved in the end. The small black and white millstone slowly rotated inside his body. This thing was very special and also very tough. Chu Feng had been in danger many times in the past. His corporeal body had rotted and even turned into blood and bones, but it had always been preserved and hadn't been destroyed. It was situated between substance and energy and had great use. Now, it had absorbed the gray powder at the most basic source and underwent a mutation. It was no longer black and white and was somewhat gray. Chu Feng's heart stirred. There was no such thing as absolute black and white in this world. Many people were walking in the gray area. He was very clear that this small gray millstone was even more extraordinary than before. What it absorbed here was an extremely special kind of source substance. It was the tangible substance left behind after the inauspicious and strange had been purified. He even suspected that this was originally a kind of astonishing thing, but it had been contaminated. Now, it had returned to its original form, and only then did it reappear in its original form. He was very clear that the small black and white millstone was very useful to him. There were many spiritual essences in the Yang realm and various mutant fruits in the dangerous areas of the mountains and rivers. He needed the small millstone to help him evolve. Originally, it was most suitable for evolvers to absorb pollen, but the small millstone could help him deal with everything and purify mutant fruits. At the same time, the small millstone's effect would be even greater if he used domain methods to evolve and devour the spiritual essences contained in the famous mountains and rivers of the Yang realm. With a buzz, the bone bracelet on the clay idol's wrist no longer glowed and dimmed. His robe sleeves also stopped fluttering and the place returned to tranquility. Chu Feng regained his freedom and was no longer confined. His expression was complicated. Was this the clay idol's attack, or was it the laws of this place to purify his body? He could only sigh. The land of reincarnation was too mysterious. Perhaps it wasn't something an evolutionary history could create. It contained great secrets and was connected to some important nodes in the history of evolution. How many people had gone on expeditions, and how many ultimate characters had appeared and resisted reincarnation? Just how many creatures were involved in this situation, and what level were they at? Were the emperors the stone fox had mentioned walking the most powerful path involved? Compared to some other creatures, what level were they at? Chu Feng had too many questions. However, he couldn't get any response no matter how he stopped and mumbled. The land of reincarnation was completely silent. Perhaps it was only on the surface, and there was no telling where the intense clashes were taking place. He understood that his level wasn't high enough. Chu Feng set out resolutely and left this place. He walked toward the incomparably mysterious reincarnation cave. That cave was the ultimate place of reincarnation. What exactly was there? His heart was in turmoil and he couldn't calm down. He was filled with anticipation and apprehension. Chapter 10:14. Swoosh. Chu Feng entered the reincarnation cave. Everything before his eyes was blurry. This place was incomparably dusky and silent. He had finally arrived here. This could already be considered the ultimate place of reincarnation, the end of the road. Chu Feng took a deep breath. His chest heaved up and down, and his heart was extremely restless. He was about to enter reincarnation. He had thought of many possibilities, but he still didn't know the nature of this road. How could he reincarnate? However, he was also excited and somewhat excited. Not long ago, the other him who was bleeding from all 7 apertures had been obliterated. He became incomparably agile and his heart was clear. It was as if the shackles of his deceived heart had been broken and he had thus returned to his true self. After entering the Yang realm, I won't be attacked by someone 2 realms above me, right? In the dilapidated universe, he had encountered the 8th-ranked god of the Yang realm, Crimson Ming, and was unexpectedly shaken by a peak god. As a mid-stage divine king, his heart was greatly moved. He had actually been attacked by someone below him. It could only be said that the true geniuses of the Yang realm were too terrifying. At the same time, Chu Feng also felt that it was related to his rapid progress. He had become a god too quickly, and there was also karma with the strange matter entangling him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so unbearable. In the long run, he would fade into the crowd. But now, his heart was filled with hope. He felt that he could go to the Yang realm to contend for hegemony. So what if he encountered a true hero? Chu Feng calmed his heart and then walked forward. The cave was too dusky. Following the stone steps, the terrain gradually became higher. He ascended the step. This path had accumulated mottled marks of time, as if it had been silent for millions of years. It was too peaceful and silent. Very soon, he arrived at an open space. This was an ancient cave that wasn't too big or too small. He could see the end of it at a glance. There were traces in the ancient cave, all of which were runes and simple diagrams. Chu Feng stared intently. Every time he looked at a line of runes or some simple diagrams, some figures would appear before his eyes. These were left behind by the reincarnators of the past. People like him had come here to be reborn with talismans and left behind traces here. At the same time, there were a few extremely heaven-defying people without talismans. It could be considered a coincidence that they had mistakenly entered this place. However, there were very few of them and they were very muddle-headed. Their spiritual light was dim and they weren't clear enough. The years were merciless, the river of time surging. However, the past scenes that were left behind here could be reproduced blurry scenes. They were all soul light. There was a woman with heaven-toppling beauty, as if she was a monarch. Even though she came here, her silver hair still flew about, looking down on everything, understanding the mysteries of heaven and earth. Chu Feng sucked in a breath of cold air. He couldn't see through the silver-haired woman's strength at all. She was too powerful. Even though they were separated by time, she still gave off a feeling that she could suppress the heavens. Moreover, this woman looked a little familiar. This place was too hazy. Chu Feng stepped forward to take a closer look. A majestic pressure that seemed to have come from the ancient past poured down from the sky, shaking the heavens and the earth, past, present, and future. Chu Feng frowned. There were other soul-light remnant images in the surroundings as well, but they were absolutely not as terrifying as this woman, able to be so oppressive even in the ultimate land of reincarnation. Even such a person came to reincarnate. What was she pursuing? Was it to reach the end of life in this world and start over? He felt that this woman might be an almighty being. At the very least, it was hard for him to estimate right now. Very soon, he shook his head again. These were all things that happened in history. No matter how stunning the life forms were, they should have long disappeared in the long river of time. Huh! Finally, Chu Feng discovered the crux of the problem. She looked familiar before, but now that he was next to her and almost touched her, he finally saw this silver-haired woman who was like a monarch clearly. She looked a little like Linoy? How was that possible? The corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows were similarly cold and elegant. Her cool temperament was like an icy spring, and her appearance was very similar. This was the embodiment of soul light, reflecting the outline and imprint of a certain life form. Chu Feng frowned and shook his head. The first person he paid attention to after entering the ultimate land of reincarnation was actually so strange. She seemed like someone he was familiar with. It was really strange. However, he didn't think that this was related to Linoy. It was just a coincidence, right? If not, the problem would be serious. Countless years ago, an extraordinary and matchless female evolver appeared. In the end, she came here to reincarnate, and he saw her again in the present world. What did this count as? After that, he looked at the other soul lights in the vicinity. Some were very strong, but some weren't necessarily much higher than him because they didn't have that kind of deterring feeling. Chu Feng was convinced that 99% of people definitely had this kind of reincarnation opportunity because their sect ancestors attacked the Forbidden Land and helped them take out the talisman paper. There was no need to think too much. Regardless of which sect or sect it was, they had to pay the price of blood and suffer disastrous losses if they wanted to obtain a talisman paper. Even celestial venerables and almighty beings might die if they didn't enter the Forbidden Land at a suitable time. Chu Feng wandered around this area and saw afterimages. The traces left behind in the past were all very powerful and extremely extraordinary. For example, he saw a Kuan-Pung woman. She had a graceful humanoid figure with brilliant golden hair and an absolutely beautiful appearance. She wore a pair of Kuan-Pung wings that were engraved all over with terrifying runes. Those were all great Tao fragments that were faintly discernible. This kind of creature was originally a legend in myths and legends. Moreover, it cultivated to an unimaginable realm. If one appeared in reality and spread its wings to strike, then it would split the sky. If she soared into the sky, the cosmic sea would probably be in turmoil. What a pity, I don't recognize the words they left behind. Chu Feng felt regretful. Before every creature set off, they more or less left behind an imprint, but they couldn't be recognized. But he could also guess that they didn't leave behind their names when they were alive, but they wrote regrets or even engraved messages in their next life. Chu Feng carefully identified them and wanted to remember everyone's soul-light true appearance because those who could come here weren't simple. Regardless of whether it was the talisman paper obtained by relying on their own strength or bestowed by their elders, they were all extraordinary. Those who could reincarnate and start over couldn't possibly be obscure and unknown in their second life. They would absolutely be super powerful. From a certain sense, these people were destined to step onto the path of the strongest. Perhaps the powerhouses of the Yang realm and a portion of the strongest celestial venerables could possibly be a portion of these people. Some people were really too powerful. Even though they were separated by time and space and weren't in the same era, Chu Feng still felt boundlessly pressured. This reincarnation cave was already infinitely weakened, but the imprints left behind by those people were still terrifying and intimidating. It was as if they wanted to crush the heavens and space and split the past and present. They wanted to cross the long river of time and appear, looking disdainfully at all the reincarnators of all the eras. Among these people, there were great demons covered in blood with disheveled hair. There was also a lone powerhouse who stepped on a sea of blood and walked alone. There was also the 1,000-armed Buddha monster who roamed unhindered in the primordial Yang realm, and the gorgeous twin sisters with identical appearances. Their appearances were rarely seen since ancient times as they overlooked the heaven and earth and transcended above. Chu Feng memorized them attentively. Regardless of whether they were relatively weak or at the peak, Their accomplishments after reincarnation were destined to be extremely terrifying. As long as they didn't die and could survive, they would illuminate the world. Remembering them could perhaps be considered remembering a portion of the powerhouses of the Yang realm. Of course, the premise was that they were still alive and hadn't been annihilated in the world and hadn't died in the long river of time. Yes, since the waters of the Yang realm are so deep, and more than 90% of them reincarnated with talismans bestowed by their elders, then perhaps the creatures that didn't come here to be reincarnated are even more terrifying. Chu Feng pondered. That was indeed the case. The evolvers that didn't come here to be reincarnated should be even more terrifying. They had already reached the point where they didn't need to be corrected in the afterlife. How terrifying were they? Some old fellows that hadn't declined since ancient times and some powerhouses had always been hibernating in the famous mountains and great rivers. It was really unknown how powerful they were. Chu Feng was lost in thought and then he was speechless. He hadn't successfully reincarnated yet, so what was the point of thinking so much now? He had to get through this hurdle before him first. What should I leave behind here? Even if they reincarnated, they could still find a bit of the might and glory of the past. It could be considered the final proof that they had lived that life back then. In this life, there are laughter and tears, but at the final juncture, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to leave anything behind. In the end, Chu Feng actually said these words. These were words from the bottom of his heart. He wanted to say them, but he didn't say anything. After a long time, Chu Feng sighed again and said, I only hope that one day, when I face my natural enemies, the players behind the reincarnation, I can sigh and say, how lonely it is to be unrivaled. Although he didn't understand, he knew that the waters here were too deep. He vaguely felt that there was a situation shrouding the endless years, and that it might involve different evolutionary histories. The nodes of the most glorious and brilliant periods, those different evolutionary paths, where did they diverge? Why did they disappear? Once it was involved and a clue appeared, then it would truly shake the past and present, and a great terror would descend upon the world. Huh! Chu Feng was stunned and a bit dumbfounded. He didn't carve any words and didn't leave any marks, but why was the phrase, how lonely it is to be unrivaled, engraved here? It softly reverberated where he stood and transformed into a special symbol. He somewhat understood. From ancient times until now, the life forms that could come to the ultimate land of reincarnation were all exceptionally talented and extraordinary existences. Quite a few of them were silent and wouldn't leave any marks. They were even more low-key than him. This was the reincarnation cave that took the initiative to brand them. Chu Feng thought about it and didn't think much of it. He walked forward with large strides and left this open land. He was going to reincarnate and reincarnate. It was time for this path to reach its end. Only, he was also a bit apprehensive. He wasn't in a soul-light state and was different from others. His corporeal body had come over. What would happen if he really went to reincarnate? Chapter 10-15. The end of the open land was even darker, as if he was about to enter a pitch-black land without light. Was this reincarnation? Chu Feng had heard a lot of folklore before he was an evolver. There would be desolation and darkness after death, and he would be ignorant and unaware of it. There was no feeling and no awareness. It was eternal coldness and darkness. That was death. Was he going to reincarnate and step into this kind of place? The further he went, the darker it got. He couldn't see his fingers in front of him and couldn't see anything. Was he going to die? He had already sunk into the absolute boundless darkness and his perception was weakening. Did he have to die here first before he could reincarnate? Chu Feng raised his spiritual sense and opened his fiery eyes. His eyes transformed into two golden runes and finally broke through the endless darkness to see the surrounding scenery. His heart palpitated. If he didn't have the fiery eyes, Even someone as powerful as a divine king would gradually have their eyes blurry and couldn't see the surrounding scenery. This was a little terrifying. The road ahead was getting darker and darker. Moreover, this was a small path, and the road was getting narrower, as if it was about to reach the end and meet a dead end. Chu Feng frowned. The situation wasn't right. There should be still fortunes. Although the little Taoist didn't mention the details of this place to him, it also explained that there was a great fortune. Can't say. There's a great secret at the end of reincarnation and a curse. Whoever dares to say too much will be punished in the future. These were the little Taoist's words back then. He was just reminding him and telling him some things that could be said. Chu Feng sighed again when he thought of his own son. This child had already been on the road for a few months. He reckoned that he had already reached his destination and succeeded before him. It was just that he didn't know whether the little Taoist could achieve his wish in this life and obtain the constitution he wanted the most and achieve an invincible body. There was a sudden turn at the end of the road. The corner of the small path was very big and it was surrounded by stone walls. There was only a narrow path that was as wide as a person. Dense fog pervaded the air as he entered an ineffable place. This ancient cave and this path were carved into the stone body. The nearby stone walls were rough and Chu Feng had tried to break them, but he couldn't because they were too hard. He had previously thought that this zone and this ultimate land wasn't material but spiritual and energy. If not, how could it bear the soul light to reincarnate? However, when he touched it with his hands, he felt an icy coldness. It should be a material object, a stone wall. With a wung sound, this place trembled. He walked through this narrow path and arrived inside an ancient palace. It gave him a strange and mysterious feeling. This was the ultimate place of reincarnation. Wasn't it naturally formed, the ghost axe made by heaven? Why did he see an ancient stone palace that had been built by man? His mind was grave, becoming incomparably serious. This so-called end, the truth of reincarnation, was becoming more and more beyond his imagination and understanding. It seemed extremely strange. The palace was extremely quiet and dark. It was as if they had stepped into a land of death, saying goodbye to this world. Chu Feng felt a slight pain in his eyes. The darkness here was actually a little too much for his fiery eyes. The runes in his golden eyes dimmed slightly. This was caused by the corrosion of the darkness. There were shadows in the palace. There were actually living beings. Chu Feng was shocked out of his wits. There were many silhouettes standing within this grand and ancient stone hall. They were all silent and clad in either old armor or ancient silk. Yes, statues. They aren't real living beings of flesh and blood. This made Chu Feng heave a sigh of relief. The main thing was that this place was too dusky. If he suddenly saw a group of living beings at the end of reincarnation, he really wouldn't be able to adapt. Most of these living beings were humanoid. In reality, it wasn't surprising. Many species would choose to take human form in the end. They're vivid and lifelike, but why do they all look so old? It's a little scary. Chu Feng approached these statues and felt a little scared. These statues were all skin and bones. Their eye sockets were sunken and the hair on their heads was sparse. He was carefully observing them to see through them. These living beings had dust on their bodies. Wasn't this ultimate place where souls went to reincarnate? Why was there dust here too? Chu Feng felt a wave of suspicion as he looked at these statues one by one. He observed them carefully with his fiery eyes. They weren't flesh and blood. They were like fossils and even about to be eroded by the wind. Perhaps they would scatter with a slight movement. What were they placed here for? Chu Feng was a bit suspicious. He felt that there was no meaning in displaying these statues in an ancient palace hall. Could it be that these people had made great contributions to the entire reincarnation, and that was why they were enshrined here? Suddenly, he discovered something strange. These people had faint marks on their backs, as if they were left behind by long blade. There were marks on their armor and bloody clothes. Chu Feng was moved and became even more cautious. He watched carefully, and when he got closer, he frowned. He saw some fine powder on the ground. Decaying matter from the scabbards. Apart from this, there are metal shavings from long blades. This shocked him quite a bit. These statues used to carry long blades on their back. In the end, they had all decayed over the years and fallen to the ground. How long ago was this? After thinking about it carefully, this ancient palace was frighteningly ancient. Even the long blades on the statues' backs had decayed. Upon careful observation, every statue was the same. They all carried blades on their back. Chu Feng sensed carefully and was shocked because he sensed a faint but familiar aura. The powder on the ground and the marks on the back of these statues all had the smell of the samsara blade. Chu Feng was shocked. These statues had all carried the samsara blade on their backs? He was no stranger to this kind of standardized weapon. He had even picked one on the samsara path and kept it for his own use. He was too familiar with it and knew how tough and terrifying it was. However, even this kind of weapon had turned into powder over the years. How terrifying was this? How many years had it existed? Chu Feng's heart palpitated, and he was also a bit suspicious. In this pitch-black palace hall, he once again carefully stared at these statues and the approaching figure. Suddenly, a figure abruptly turned around, revealing a set of eerie white teeth. The figure revealed a sinister smile at Chu Feng. It was simply too terrifying in the dark. This unforeseen event was too shocking and abrupt. In the originally silent ancient palace hall, a statue opened its mouth. It had come back to life. It was too frightening. The temperature in the entire ancient palace hall plummeted. The bone-chilling cold attacked Chu Feng's back, making his hair stand on end and his scalp go numb. This figure was withered and skinny. Its skin was like stone and its eye sockets were sunken. When it opened its mouth, there were actually fangs that were dripping with blood. Chu Feng almost cried out and cursed. He staggered backward, his scalp going numb and his body going cold. This was too strange and terrifying. Earlier, he had seen it with the fiery eyes without any problems. How could it come back to life now? As expected of the reincarnation cave, there were some things he couldn't see through. Bang! When Chu Feng fell back, he bumped into another statue. As a result, his back felt as if it had been cut by a knife. The cold pierced into his bones. He suddenly turned around and found that this statue had also come back to life. Its sunken eyes were dripping blood and it opened its mouth. It made creaking sounds as if it wanted to bite him. Chu Feng evaded and watched with flickering eyes. His entire body was ice cold from head to toe. All of the statues in this palace opened their mouths, all of them turning around, all of them staring at him. Their eye sockets were sunken, their stone eyelids cracked, dripping blood, teeth white, the corners of their mouths carrying strange smiles. In the darkness, Chu Feng's hair stood on end and he felt a chill run down his spine. All the statues were alive? Even the reincarnation blades on their backs had rotted away. How long had these creatures existed? It was truly a bit frightening and made Chu Feng tremble with fear. Moreover, what were they standing here for? Clang! He immediately pulled out a divine sword. This was a divine general-level weapon used for defense. He held the stone box in his other hand and was incomparably solemn and serious. The closest creature was about to pounce on him. After it opened its mouth, its face was shriveled like a skeleton, but its teeth were still white. Blood flowed from its 7 orifices, and it was about to attack Chu Feng. Chu Feng didn't hold back at all. He didn't care if it was the ultimate place of reincarnation or not. When the time came, he would attack. He stabbed his sword into its mouth. Crack! Crack! The crisp sound was very ear-piercing and broke the tranquility of the ancient palace hall. The divine general-level sword was broken inch by the skeleton-like creature's open mouth. A chill ran down Chu Feng's spine. This really made him a bit scared. At this moment, all the statues in the palace hall were about to pounce and attack Chu Feng. This made his body tense up and extremely nervous. Then, cracking sounds rang out incessantly. When these statues were about to pounce, they all fell apart. Their heads fell to the ground and their arms fell to the ground, scattering into a large pile. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. He was ready for a life-and-death battle, but this happened? He felt relieved. If these creatures could still move and attack, they would have killed him as soon as he entered this place. Their energy was exhausted, they couldn't even release order and natural laws. Many of their bodies' joints had already decayed, and that was why they fell apart. On the ground, there were some skulls rolling about and some remains trembling. They all wanted to attack Chu Feng, but it was all futile. "Just how long have you all stayed here for?" He really wanted to know. However, no one replied to him. These creatures, perhaps they couldn't be considered real creatures at all. They were all petrified, and should have long returned to dust. The reason they could survive was because of the seal, but they themselves had long reached the point where they couldn't hold on any longer. These creatures were standing here, protecting something. Were they carrying out some type of order? One had to understand that this was the ultimate place of reincarnation. The enforcers of the end of reincarnation. Chu Feng sighed, making this type of conjecture. On the reincarnation path, there were similar creatures, but they definitely weren't as powerful as the ones here. They maintained order and he had even seized a blade. It was clear that the creatures set up in the ultimate place of reincarnation were even more ancient and even more terrifying. However, it was quite a pity that they were never put to use. They themselves had already decayed. From ancient times until now, who would bring their previous life's flesh with them when reincarnating? Only Chu Feng did this. Leaving behind these creatures in the ancient cave where the soul passed through, was it all for the sake of capturing those with flesh? In the end, these creatures all became corpses themselves, turning this place into a corpse palace. Chu Feng quickly left, not wasting any more time. He didn't want anything unexpected to happen at the final end. It was better to reincarnate into the Yang realm earlier. He couldn't stay here for too long. However, he was also frowning. He was about to reincarnate, so what was he going to do with this body? He couldn't just bring this body to reincarnate, right? Chapter 10:16. Chu Feng was at a loss. How was he going to reincarnate? Others obtained the talisman paper and burned it in front of the clay idol. If they could successfully reach this place, they would naturally be overjoyed and reincarnate with their past life's wisdom. Their future accomplishments would be limitless. But now, Chu Feng was worried and reluctant to part with this life's corporeal body. He felt that this was him. If he changed to a flesh idol, he would always feel awkward. Sigh. He sighed. This ultimate land was originally cold and desolate, but now, the peace was broken. After leaving that ancient corpse palace, he entered a dusky area. This was a huge ancient cave, but it wasn't spacious. Rocks were lying in disarray. In the cave, there were some giant rocks that were like fierce tigers crouching, overflowing with fiendish aura. There were also some rocks with dense cracks. Upon closer inspection, it was as if phoenix feathers were spreading out. It was clearly like the imprint of an immortal bird, emitting a terrifying might. Something's wrong. What kind of stone material is this? Why do I feel that it's different? Chu Feng was astonished. Soon he saw a wisp of fiendish aura on that fierce tiger stone that could tear one's mind apart. Fiendish tiger, the primordial fierce tiger, is in charge of killing. This thing is no small matter. The fiendish aura is too fierce. If it's cultivated into the human body's sword chi, for example, the gung metal sword chi in the lungs, wouldn't it be able to kill until the sun and moon lose their light? Once it enters the battlefield, it can even sweep away a magnificent army. Chu Feng saw something out of the ordinary. His heart jumped. This couldn't be the land of fortune at the end of reincarnation, right? He could see at a glance that the cracks were dense like the immortal bird spreading its wings. The rocks were also strange. Flames could be faintly seen inside, about to burn the 33 heavens. Undying flames? Chu Feng's face revealed a strange expression. However, no matter if it was the fierce tiger stone or the phoenix stone, they were both damaged. Someone had absorbed the essence within. Although there was still substance left, it was far from being at its peak. At this time, a very fine but extremely mystical purple chi floated over from afar. It actually surged with the sound of the great Tao. It was so deafening that it made people realize as if they were about to be enlightened and comprehend the Tao. Chu Feng was shocked and couldn't help but cry out. Could this be the legendary primordial purple mist? He remembered that even Empyrean Rockfox had mentioned this item before, saying that it was extremely beneficial to body refinement, soul light cultivation, and so on. In the Yang realm, even a celestial venerable might not necessarily be able to capture this kind of material for his most beloved disciple. It was too rare, priceless, and could only be chanced upon by luck. Without a doubt, there was something inside the Forbidden Land. But if an Empyrean killed their way in, they would also die, let alone obtain a wisp of purple mist. Whoosh! Chu Feng acted decisively, wanting to imprison that wisp of purple mist. However, with a hong sound, a tsunami-like sound erupted. Great Tao fragments danced about, and it directly scattered, disappearing before his eyes just like that. Chu Feng missed, and almost crashed into a piece of crouching ox rock. In the end, a cow's roar came from that place, followed by a loud moo, like the sound of a great bell, flipping him over. Chu Feng was astonished. This cave was truly filled with miraculous things. There were all kinds of rare materials that were greatly beneficial to cultivation, to the point where they could even change one's bloodline and be reborn. Ordinary people would most likely go crazy upon entering. This crouching ox rock contained a wisp of primordial barbaric ox's origin chi, which could create this race's primogenitor-like creature for no reason. Of course, this should be the exotic desolate beast that transcended divine beasts mentioned by Rockfox. Without a doubt, the birds and beasts here were all exotic desolate grade. Yellow cattle and big black yak had passed by here before. He didn't know whether they had obtained a fortune or not, but he quickly shook his head. If he were to reincarnate again, he still didn't know what species he would become. The two oxen most likely wouldn't choose. What will I become? Will I still be a human? Chu Feng was in a daze. For a moment, he actually forgot to look for fortunes. He was a little horrified. What if he reincarnated into a bird or beast? So what if he became a plant? In a split second, he was scared. He felt more and more that his corporeal body was still the best. He really didn't want to take risks and didn't want to entrust his future to the unknown. In the dusky ancient cave, a bright and beautiful light emerged and exploded in the distance, turning into a rain of light. It was as if an immortal had ascended. In the haze, it was as if a fairy was dancing transcendent. Immortal ascension light? A bright and dazzling wisp of flowing light blossomed there. Rules and order curled up beside it, presenting a splendid feeling akin to a sky full of stars swaying gently. It was sacred, dignified, and transcendent. This was the most intuitive feeling it gave people. There was also a certain awe-inspiring dignity, but it was relatively overlooked. Chu Feng was shaken. He rushed over in the first instance and wanted to seize it. This item was stronger than that wisp of purple mist, and it was similarly something that evolvers yearned for even in their dreams. However, when he rushed over, the rain of time dispersed and vanished into the vicinity of that rock. He had already disappeared into the walls of the reincarnation cave. He had failed once again. Chu Feng sighed. Was the fortune here not fated with him? He had heard the little Taoist divulge that there weren't many good things here, but there weren't many materials that were truly fated with him. There were even fewer that could be taken away. So much so that the little Taoist guessed that each person could only choose one type and couldn't take away a second. The little Taoist had tried before. The gurgling sound of flowing water suddenly appeared not far away. Calling it a brook might be an exaggeration because it wasn't even a foot long, but it was like a magnificent stream. It extended between the cracks of the rocks and emitted the tinkling sound of a spring stream. Don't tell me this is the origin river of the moon? Chu Feng was astonished. He had once heard celestial venerable stone fox talk about some heavenly materials and earthly treasures that could only be chanced upon but not sought after. Even if it was just a strand of the origin river of the moon from the era of creation, it would transform into a sea of moon if it truly merged into a river or sea. If such a brook, that was over a foot long, was the origin of the era of creation, it could already be considered magnificent. Whether it was refined into a weapon, used to cultivate pill furnaces and medicinal herbs, or fused with one's own body, it was at a terrifying level. Swoosh! When Chu Feng stealthily crept over and prepared to collect this origin stream of moon, it was like a loach that disappeared into the cracks of the rocks. Chu Feng was driven mad. Could he not obtain anything by guarding the reincarnation cave? Could it be that none of the opportunities and natural luck here were fated to be with him? Chu Feng pondered. He grasped the secret manual of the wonderful 7 treasures technique and knew how to cultivate it. If he gathered all 7 types of heaven and earth treasures here, the results would be unimaginable. And let's look around. Perhaps I really can find something. Blazing heat transmitted over. A small dragon the length of a chopstick, dazzling golden and incomparably divine, lazily basked in the sun on a rock. Sun Dragon River. His heart jumped. He didn't act blindly without thinking, fearing that he would be drawing water with a sieve again. Instead, he carefully observed. This was a section of the Sun Dragon River from the era of creation. It had taken the form of a dragon. Not to mention so many, even a single strand or drop would make all sects tremble and fight over it if it was placed in the outside world. No matter what it was, as long as it involved the era of creation, its value would definitely skyrocket. It contained the Tao laws and order fragments of the primordial era. This time, Chu Feng made ample preparations. He remained calm and collected, only seizing the opportunity at the final juncture. He released a lightning strike and swooped down to take action. With a hoo sound, his right hand began to burn. This Sun Dragon River was touched by him, and when he grabbed a bit, there seemed to be 2 drops of it. Even a divine king like him felt like his palm was about to turn into charcoal. Chu Feng released a strange cry and hurriedly activated his breathing technique. He used the natural laws to restrict this place and retracted his hand, restricting these 2 drops of primordial precious liquid. He finally obtained something. Chu Feng waited for these 2 drops of golden liquid to calm down, and only then did he carefully approach them. He tried to collect them at his side and slowly refine them. This wouldn't do. He felt like he had to take action decisively and seize a bit of everything he saw. Otherwise, the reincarnation cave would only have 2 drops of primordial precious liquid, and that would be too much of a disadvantage. Moo! The ox's roar shook the heavens. That crouching ox rock was smashed apart by Chu Feng, releasing strands of black light. He frantically absorbed it, wanting to refine it into all of the cells in his body. In the end, this primordial barbaric ox obtained its origin light. As a result, the 2 drops of Sun Dragon River liquid immediately exploded, scattering and escaping. Damn it! Chu Feng was regretful. He was both shocked and angry. A bad feeling emerged in his heart. Could it be that he could only obtain 1 type of natural luck in this place? If he exceeded it, then it would be confiscated and those substances would disperse? He arrived at the side of the vicious tiger rock and smashed it open. He picked up a strand of tiger baleful aura. It could control killing, but in the end, He had just collected it when the primordial barbaric ox's origin black light flew away. He couldn't keep it. It really is like this? Chu Feng was dumbstruck. For someone who entered a treasure mountain and saw so many natural luck, it really was like 100 claws scratching at his heart. It was too unbearable. What should he do? He was too unwilling to only take away one type of natural luck. Chu Feng was worried. According to normal circumstances, the natural luck obtained would ultimately merge with the soul light and then follow the host to reincarnate. A child born like this, regardless of whether it was his flesh or soul light, would naturally be extraordinary. Amen. I'll use the stone box to carry it. It's all sealed inside. Don't even think of running away. I'll slowly refine it after reincarnation. Chu Feng pondered, not knowing if it was feasible. He decisively sealed the vicious tiger baleful aura into the stone box. Then, he went to knock on the rock full of cracks to search for the phoenix flame. A strand of faint flame called the undying flame emerged from the cracks in the rock. With a chi sound, it was collected into the stone box by Chu Feng. I succeeded. Chu Feng was incomparably excited and jumped up all of a sudden. He knew that this meant that he could collect more natural luck. He could pack it all up and take it away. The effects were too great. Next, he began to attack and collect in this ancient cave. Of course, regardless of whether it was the tiger baleful aura or the undying flame, they had all been collected by others. What was left was only a remnant, but it was already enough for Chu Feng. After all, he was prepared to touch every kind of substance a bit. Where are the top natural luck? Ascending immortal light, primordial purple mist, realm stone, origin fruit. Where did they all go? Don't tell me they won't appear again after appearing once? Chu Feng was bewildered and his heart was dripping blood. He had seen several rare natural luck before, but none of them appeared later on. There's a dark stalk of grass over there with 33 leaves. Each leaf has a strange vein. Heavens, could this be? This was the first time Chu Feng had lost control of himself. This was very similar to one of the earth-shaking substances that had appeared in ancient times in the Yang realm, according to celestial venerable Rockfox. It was suspected to be the 33-layered heavens grass. Chu Feng didn't want to think too much and quickly made his move. He didn't want to miss this opportunity and was willing to use all kinds of natural luck here to fill up the space inside the stone box. Pop! A soft sound rang out. In the end, Chu Feng missed the 33-layered heavens grass. He didn't grab a single leaf, but he managed to tear off a small part of its root and hold it in his hand. The 33-layered heavens grass sank into the stone wall and disappeared without a trace. His face alternated between green and white. Then, he smiled in relief. This root might be even more useful. After all, it was it that had given birth to 33 leaves. He could only comfort himself like this. I'll win by quantity. I'll collect everything. I don't believe I can't compare to those creatures that have obtained world-shaking natural luck. Chu Feng was determined. Since the natural luck here didn't take the initiative to choose him and all of them were fleeing, he also threw caution to the wind. He was prepared to dig 3 feet into the ground and forcefully plunder everything. Chapter 10:17. Ding ding dong dong. Chu Feng held the ice-cold and bright divine halberd in his hand as he smacked the rocks and other things in this grand reincarnation cave. He really wanted to dig 3 feet into the ground and turn this place upside down to take away all the fortunes. Unfortunately, the rock walls here were too sturdy. 2 of the divine swords had been broken, but they couldn't do anything to the coarse stone walls. They could only hit the rocks on the ground. Although he hadn't found the realm stone, 33-layered heavens grass, and other rare fortunes, he did come across some other fortunes. He decisively put them into the stone box and didn't let any of them go. Where's the primordial violet mist? Come out. Where's the primordial fruit? Hurry up and appear. Chu Feng dawdled along the way. He was truly a little unwilling. It was rumored that in the history of evolution, there were some almighty beings who were born with fragrant bodies and accompanied by great Tao fragments. They were known as immortal infants and heavenly infants. Doubtlessly, according to the speculation of the predecessors, these beings were reincarnated from the reincarnation cave. They had obtained great fortunes and fused with rare energy fruits to reincarnate with them. Their achievements were bound to be limitless. Chu Feng felt that since he had set foot in this place and was about to be reborn, he should strive for the highest level of fortunes. In fact, he was very satisfied with the 33-layered heaven's grass. If he carried it in his mouth and reincarnated, who knew what kind of monster the newborn would grow into with its nourishment? Clang, clang, clang. When Chu Feng was smacking an unremarkable black rock, a gust of qi rushed out with great pressure, causing the entire ancient cave to tremble and buzz. This was only a mass of qi, but it seemed boundlessly heavy, causing the entire place to shake. Mysterious yellow qi? Chu Feng cried out. This thing was too famous. Even if there was mysterious yellow in the Yin realm, it was still an impurity. This kind of mysterious yellow qi was difficult to find even in the Yang realm. Empyrean Stone Fox had specifically warned him that if he encountered such a thing, even if it was the son of an Empyrean or the illegitimate daughter of an Almighty, he shouldn't be polite. He also shouldn't be afraid of death. He should bravely go up and fight for it. As long as he didn't die, he had to seize it. Because in the letter Shi who left for Chu Feng regarding the path to the strongest, it specifically mentioned this kind of mysterious yellow energy. This thing could refine the body, and after it fused with one's flesh and blood, it could make one's body sturdy and indestructible. Raising one's hand or foot would give one the strength to pull up mountains, throw dragons, and even suppress divine beasts. This was simply the favorite of body refiners. At the same time, it could also merge with one's spirit and make one's soul light even more condensed. Once it swept out, it would be like a firm and terrifying sword embryo. According to what Shi Hu said, there were 2 or 3 famous people in the ancient times of the Yang realm who had obtained the black-yellow origin qi and condensed it into one with their own bodies. That was simply impenetrable by a myriad of techniques, and it shook the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. A simple punch from this kind of person could make the treasured weapon in the other party's hand explode and collapse the super-large-scale domain that guarded the mountain gate of a first-rate orthodoxy. It was simply unsolvable and couldn't be blocked. This thing wasn't inferior to the primordial purple mist, the 6 paths of reincarnation blood, the 33-layered heaven's grass, and so on. It could be considered a kind of great fortune that shook both ancient and modern times. Chu Feng held back his soul light and completely merged with this place. He was in harmony and natural with the surrounding environment. After that, he suddenly launched an attack and did everything he could to collect the black-yellow origin qi. He was as swift as lightning as he covered the area in front of him. In the end, this black-yellow energy shattered the black stone body. With a rumble, it was like a prehistoric emperor beast as tsunami-like fluctuations shook the heavens and the earth. It plunged into the stone wall, and its traces were indistinct. Motherf *Ker. Chu Feng forcefully hammered the stone wall. He let go of another great fortune, and this was really unbearable. His heart was dripping blood, and his spirit was dispirited. Huh! That wasn't right either. The webbing between his thumb and forefinger split open in his hand, and dark red blood flowed out. It was dripping with blood, but there was also a strand of black-yellow origin qi condensed there. It lingered nearby, and he obtained a small portion. Collect. Chu Feng collected it into the stone box. At long last, he had some gains. He didn't seek to obtain all of them, but it wouldn't be impossible for him to collect a little bit of everything. His heart was thumping madly. He didn't know whether this little bit of black-yellow origin qi was enough. Sure, whose personal letter had once said that it was best to collect this kind of substance. If he wanted to achieve a heaven-warping body, perhaps it was indispensable. However, it didn't matter even if it was a little bit less. It should be enough for him to use in the early stages. Sure, who had once told him that this kind of substance was suspected to exist in a certain dangerous place in the Yang realm. He could go and search for it when he was strong enough and take away the opportunity. Back then, Sure, whose master had a negative opinion of him and was extremely dissatisfied. One of the reasons was because he suspected that Sure, who had made a discovery in a certain forbidden area and didn't take the initiative to report the clues of black-yellow energy, heavenly bone, and other substances. Chu Feng licked his lips and felt that it was a bit of a pity. If he could seize the whole mass of black-yellow energy here, he wouldn't have to fight for it in the future. He calmed his mind and continued to search in this vast ancient cave. Very soon, he discovered that there was a rock that was very special. It had a total of 6 holes, and brightly colored blood flowed from the 6 holes endlessly from one hole to another. Chu Feng felt that his heart was about to stop and he was almost going to suffocate. Did he hit the jackpot? Why did fortune that shook both ancient and modern times appear one after another? This was very much like the blood of 6 paths of reincarnation. Chu Feng exhausted all of his abilities. Both his soul light and physical body were moving as he unleashed his divine skill and confined the void. He wished he could immediately obtain that brightly colored blood. This kind of blood was extremely beneficial to evolvers. Some people said that this was the blood of heaven and earth, while others said that this was the blood of reincarnation. Once any living creature absorbed it, it could promote their violent evolution, purify their bloodline, and increase their innate talents. In Sure, whose personal letter, this item was mentioned with great emphasis. It was rarely seen since the beginning of time and had only appeared a few times in the Yang realm. As for the Yang realm, there was simply no need to think about it. It had never appeared before and had never been heard of. Chu Feng himself possessed the blood of a humanoid monarch. It was indeed considered a kind of extraordinary bloodline, at least in the Yang realm. He didn't know what would happen after he entered the Yang realm and whether or not he would still be ranked. He also didn't know whether this kind of bloodline was thin or thick in his own body. However, if he obtained the nourishment of the blood of 6 paths of reincarnation, he could purify the strongest blood he possessed and make it thicker. It could also trigger a mutation in his bloodline and perhaps transform it into an even stronger one. The entire rock was confined by Chu Feng. The 6 holes shone and brightly colored blood flowed about. Chu Feng's expression was grave, but he didn't relax. That was because he felt that the reincarnation cave was preventing him from obtaining the great fortune and didn't really like him. Perhaps it had something to do with him bringing his physical body over. It didn't approve of this kind of behavior and didn't believe he could successfully reincarnate. As expected, the brightly colored blood was incomparably divine at the final juncture. It rushed up and the order that Chu Feng used couldn't confine it at all. It was like a great river that was tens of thousands of kilometers long had burst its dike. It surged without end and disappeared into the rough stone walls with a deafening sound. Chu Feng almost risked his life, but in the end, he only managed to grab a puddle of blood that surrounded the stone box and was sucked in with a whoosh. Damn it! Chu Feng ground his teeth. Forget it. One who is content will always be happy. He comforted himself like this. Before long, Chu Feng finally found a kind of complete fortune. It was a realm stone the size of a thumb. Whether this kind of thing was fused into soul light or refined into a spiritual weapon in the future, or directly refined into a weapon in one's hand, it was an ultimate material. But he still sighed. He had clearly seen an even bigger one before. It was as big as a human head, but it had run away. You rotten wood, you stubborn rocks. You really have eyes but can't recognize a supreme powerhouse. If you don't go with me, there will be a time for you to cry in the future. Chu Feng was indignant. After feeling around here for a long time, Chu Feng was convinced that he couldn't obtain anything, so he prepared to go on his way. Before leaving, Chu Feng was really digging the ground. He saw a few areas with soil, so he directly dug all the way. The so-called 1 square meter space inside the stone box was far from full. That was because the fortunes and opportunities he collected were all in wisps and clumps of matter. All of them were added together, so they didn't take up much space. As a result, he started to fill up the soil here. Perhaps he could plant 3 seeds in the future and have an unexpected harvest. If someone saw this, they would definitely be extremely speechless. This master was too crazy. He was digging earth in this ancient cave in the ultimate land of reincarnation. He was really crazy enough. What the f***ck? When he was digging, Chu Feng jumped in fright. He actually dug out a hand from the ground. It was swarthy, shriveled, and cold. It couldn't be pulled out of nowhere. It was too terrifying. What's going on? This is a corporeal body. Did someone run here to reincarnate just like me? It looks a little miserable. Did he fail? He estimated and felt a bit scared. In a bit, I'll throw a stone to ask for directions. I'll throw you down first, he muttered and stared at that dark hand. Chu Feng already saw that there was a hazy land not far away. Once he jumped in, he would be reincarnated. There were terrifying great Tao fragments there that were explaining the truth. There was no need for words to explain, and there was no need for others to tell them. The laws there revealed everything. Is there anyone in the reincarnation cave? Master of reincarnation, pack it up. If you can't eat it, you'll have to bear the consequences. Pack up all of the fortunes for me. I'm going on my way. Chapter 10:18. The whirlpool spun as if it was covered in layers and layers of star sand. It was hazy and mysterious, and the bottom was incomparably deep. Sigh, I'm going to reincarnate in the end. Chu Feng stood there, worried about personal gains and losses. This was how to jump up and say goodbye to this life, ending his life in the netherworld. However, reincarnation was also full of uncertainties. Many things would be accompanied by accident. I really don't want to abandon my physical body. What will happen if I jump down like this? Chu Feng was conflicted. If he really jumped down like this, how would he be born with such a big body? Moreover, this whirlpool made one's heart palpitate. He kept feeling that it was very terrifying. Chu Feng was worried that if he jumped down like this, would he be obliterated? Amidst the clanging sounds, he put on all kinds of divine-grade armor and held the great halberd in his hand. He was fully armed. Could he resist the power of reincarnation like this? Could he successfully reincarnate? Chu Feng used his mysterious art. His body crackled and exploded as he shrunk continuously. However, he still felt that it was a bit unreliable. Even if he turned into the size of a fist, wore armor, and came into being with the golden halberd in his hand, he was still too freakish. It was fine if he encountered an ordinary family, but if he really reincarnated into a transcendent family, would he be taken as a demon and beaten to death? Chu Feng gave it a try. He inserted the great halberd into the whirlpool, and with a clang, the divine-grade golden halberd directly disappeared. That snow-white halberd blade turned into flying ashes. He couldn't help but retreat with the great halberd in hand. This place was truly dangerous. Chu Feng thought about it and took that black, withered, and ice-cold hand over. This so-called throwing a stone to test the waters really needed something sturdy. This was dug out from the ultimate place of reincarnation. He didn't know its origins, so it was just right to use it to test the waters. However, he was also a bit worried. What if someone in the world of the living really grew a hand after throwing it out like this? Wouldn't that be committing a sin? I'm just sensing the power of reincarnation. It's better not to act recklessly. Chu Feng held the cold and shriveled hand and didn't dare to let go. He didn't want to cause a tragedy in a certain family because of him. He just wanted to test the waters. When the black hand slightly touched the hazy whirlpool, the star's sand-like soft brilliance there immediately began to rotate, emitting an ear-piercing and terrifying sound. This was because this black hand was being ground. The part that reached in was shortening, turning into fine powder. Chu Feng's heart trembled, and he hurriedly retracted his hand. He looked at the blackened hand. It was broken, and that part of it had been destroyed. Previously, he had already experimented with it. Even someone as strong as a divine king like him could not leave a single mark on this black palm. One could imagine how tough it was. Chu Feng guessed that this was at least the hand of an Empyrean, or even the remains of a supreme being. But in the face of the reincarnation vortex, it seemed so weak. Was this a vortex that specialized in chasing and intercepting physical bodies? Would his soul be crushed if he threw it in? Chu Feng did not dare to try. If he split a part of his divine sense and created a clone to reincarnate, then it would be very troublesome. This is going to be difficult. He increasingly felt that reincarnation with a physical body wasn't too reliable. He would be obstructed here, and whoever dared to sneak in would be killed on the spot. Should I leave my physical body here? A question arose in Chu Feng's mind. Was the clay idol outside the reincarnation cave related to this? Apart from being a protector, the clay idol could also be a person who had stayed behind. Had he left his physical body here, and his soul had gone to reincarnate? Chu Feng's imagination ran wild. If this was the case, he could also consider placing his physical body with the clay idol and accept the sacrifices of talismans and incense for many years. His soul light would go to reincarnate, and when he remembered one day, he could come back here to search for his previous physical body. His expression was solemn, and then he revealed a strange expression. The more he thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. This really was a path. Chu Feng separated his physical body from his soul light. He hesitated for a while. If he sent his physical body away and his soul went to reincarnate, then there really would be no way out. Yes, it'd be great if I could reincarnate into the family of a DU realm evolver. From then on, I'd be the second generation and let my old servant beat up the great martial deity and the others. Chu Feng muttered to himself there. Naturally, this kind of thing could only be thought of as it was simply unrealistic. If DU realm evolvers weren't crazy, then they were monsters. No one knew what they had evolved into, and it was full of uncertainty. How could they still be in the mood to produce offspring? Not to mention this level, it was very difficult for powerhouses and celestial venerables to produce offspring. The stronger one was, the harder and more impossible it was to produce offspring. Sigh, if I reincarnate like this, what should I do if I'm not careful and reincarnate into a vicious beast? How many years will I have to spend before I can cultivate into a human? Chu Feng worried about personal gains and losses and began to let his imagination run wild. He was really afraid that he would reincarnate into a rat, a black turtle, a long worm, and other species that people didn't like. Motherf asterisk cur, if I become a monkey with a big mouth, who am I going to reason with? The more he pondered, the more upset he felt. If he really was like Ouyang Feng and didn't know what he would transform into, that would truly be a little terrifying. If he became a beast and had 3 years of confusion in the womb, only God knew what would happen. It's said that those who reincarnate with talisman paper will generally be reincarnated into a good body and those tragic disasters won't happen, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Moreover, he thought of another extremely serious problem and his expression turned ugly for a moment. What if I'm not careful and reincarnate into a female baby? Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He had goosebumps all over his body when he thought of that outcome. He couldn't help but lower his head to take a look. A cold wind blew between his legs. It was truly unbearable. With a whoosh, Chu Feng's soul light returned to his physical body. He didn't want his soul to reincarnate even if he was beaten to death. If he were to become a young girl, he wouldn't be able to bear it even if he was exceptionally charming. He might as well be beaten to death. Screw your second grandfather. I don't care about Celestial Venerable's aristocratic family or to use heir. I won't think about it anymore. If I reincarnate, I'll make my own decisions. He made a thorough decision. He didn't want to gamble with that uncertain future. I just want to give it a try and reincarnate my physical body. Clang, clang, clang. With a shake of his hand, he tossed the divine sword, large halberd, and armor on his body onto the ground. I've taken away some fortunes from here. Now, I'm leaving behind some divine weapons for those who come after me to gift them to the fated. He didn't blush at all when he said these words. Just think about it. Who would care about the few lousy weapons he left behind for a soul light that could reach this place? What they needed were the 33-layered heaven's grass, mysterious yellow, and various other fortunes in this place. In fact, Chu Feng was afraid that he would accidentally injure himself in the process of reincarnating while bringing these weapons along. At the same time, he was also afraid that his mother in the Yang realm wouldn't be able to give birth easily. It would be outrageous for him to be born wearing armor and carrying a long spear and large sword. Chu Feng sighed and said, "I'll take a risk this time. Everything is to avoid gender conversion, avoid becoming the second generation of rats, and avoid becoming the true grandson of the black tortoise. I'll rely on myself to directly charge through." Only, he reckoned that he would be a little sorry to his future parent. He might give the entire clan a big fright when he was just born. Yes, even though the possibility is minuscule, I still hope to be born into a small family. By all means, it mustn't be a great universe-level aristocratic family. Otherwise, I won't be able to hide any of the secrets on my body. In particular, he was preparing to use the stone box. It was impossible for this thing to not attract the attention of the ultimate powerhouses even if he didn't want to. Goodbye, little netherworld. There would eventually be a day when he would return to take a look. With a ripping sound, Chu Feng used the stone box and stored himself inside. He was prepared to rely on its protection to forcefully charge into the Starson-like vortex and truly reincarnate. Being born inside the stone box was better than giving birth to a monster covered in armor, wasn't it? Of course, he admitted that he would definitely fail and die a miserable death if he dared to wear a divine-grade armor and descend into the world. Only the stone box had the possibility of success and could pass through the hazy vortex. After entering the stone box, the inside was overflowing with light and vibrant colors. It was incomparably divine and dazzling to the extreme. It was filled with all kinds of fortunes. With so many rare ultimate treasures around him, Chu Feng felt a lot more confident in his heart. The moment the stone box's lid was sealed, he suddenly activated it and charged into the hazy and mysterious vortex to reincarnate. Chapter 10-19. Chu Feng's vision was blurry. After he shut himself in the stone box, he ran headfirst into the hazy vortex. He was rather resolute and thus entered this extremely mysterious passage that countless people wanted to understand and explore since ancient times, but no one knew about. I'm reincarnating. I'm reincarnating. He was somewhat apprehensive in his heart. Even if he was very decisive just now, he still felt uneasy after stepping on this path. The true reincarnation had begun. Where was he going? This involved his race, parents, and so on. He would become a newborn baby and start all over again. What kind of innate gifts would he have? Would he be able to distinguish himself in the Yang realm's heaven-bestowed genius ranking? Why do I feel that I really might become the son of a great universe realm evolver? Even though he was uneasy, he still felt good about himself. If someone were here, they would definitely sneer at his narcissism. All of a sudden, the stone box shook violently and erupted with glaring rays of light. After entering the vortex shrouded in star sand, the stone box violently flipped over as it suffered the most terrifying impact. This caused Chu Feng, who was in the box, to tumble along with it. He collided with some creation substances and grimaced in pain. In particular, his body was in considerable pain after coming into contact with the stone box's wall. Even the interior of the stone box was surging with rays of light. It was evident what kind of pressure it was withstanding on the outside. For a moment, Chu Feng saw the stone box gradually become sparkling and translucent like a translucent colored glass. He could vaguely see some hazy light on the outside. Bang! In a split second, the stone box suffered another heavy blow. It was as if 10,000 swords were slashing at him and 1,000 spears were stabbing at him. Even though he was inside the stone box, Chu Feng was still shaken dizzy and his vision blurred. After that, he even exploded and turned into a ball of blood and soul-light fragments. He let out a loud cry as he felt his soul being torn apart. The pain all over his body was unbearable. Even the stone box couldn't block the mysterious energy outside. Very soon, he found out that the stone box's lid had been shaken until it was slightly loose, so it couldn't protect him. Seal! Chu Feng's soul light reassembled as he roared over there. But just as he sealed the lid, it was struck by the terrifying multicolored light beams outside and loosened once again. His blood and soul light both exploded, turning into a rain of light. It was as if they were about to turn into nothingness, and his life imprint was about to disperse here. At the critical moment, the roots of the 33-layered heaven's grass touched his blood and soul light rain, bringing him endless vitality. Chu Feng quickly recovered and his true body appeared again. The 33-layered heaven's grass shocked both ancient and modern times. It simply didn't belong to the mortal world. The place where it took root was bound to be heaven-defying. Now it was just a root hair, yet it had instantly revived Chu Feng. Moreover, there was still a lot of it left. When Chu Feng recovered, the first thing he did was to fasten the lid of the box tightly to ensure that it was tightly sealed. However, the outside world was shaking more and more violently, and the world was turning upside down. Vaguely, he could see some of the scenery outside through the gradually translucent walls of the box. There were things like sharp claws, black shadows, blazing flames, and all kinds of terrifying sceneries. Was he on the way to reincarnation? Chu Feng was suspicious. The outside world was grotesque and dazzling. Could it be that everything he saw was just an illusion and he couldn't see the essence? Bang! The stone box flipped over and a crack appeared on the lid of the box again. Even someone as powerful as him, a mid-stage divine king, couldn't guarantee that the lid of the stone box would be tightly fastened. His hands were tattered and then his body exploded. Even if only a crack appeared on the stone box, he died instantly. Even his soul light was burning along with his blood. Normally speaking, this could be considered as dying again. In a breath's time, Chu Feng seemed to have sunk into eternal darkness. Was he going to die just like this? Before his last consciousness dissipated, he felt incomparable despair. He had already stepped onto the path of reincarnation, yet his body and soul were actually going to be annihilated. He really wanted to figure out why this path was so resistant to those with corporeal bodies. What was the great secret behind it? This was clearly blocking this path. Those who dared to cross it with their corporeal bodies would definitely be wiped out. They wouldn't give anyone any chance. A bit of warmth flowed over and spread towards Chu Feng's destroyed consciousness. It nourished the last drop of blood and nourished the exploded soul light rain, reviving it and making it full of vitality. 6 paths of reincarnation blood. It was this kind of substance. It was the blood nurtured by the heaven and earth, and was a legend since ancient times. It could purify the bloodline of heavenly geniuses and allow them to mutate even further. Its value couldn't be measured. It made all the major characters' eyes turn red. Once it appeared, the ancestors of various sects would come out and kill until rivers of blood flowed and mountains of corpses formed. Now that it had spread over, reviving Chu Feng naturally couldn't be considered a difficult matter. This was a heaven-defying item. When Chu Feng recovered, his heart was dripping blood. This was the blood of 6 paths of reincarnation. It was difficult to find even one drop in the entire world. The small pool he had obtained had been consumed by a quarter in a short while. While he was screaming, his body was about to disintegrate again. He rapidly circulated his breathing technique and used the laws to seal the lid of the box. But he couldn't endure it in less than 2 seconds. It was as if a great mountain was smashing down on him from the outside world. The stone box shook and he was shaken until the lid loosened a bit. As expected, Chu Feng's body and soul exploded into a bloody mist and flowing light. It was an extremely miserable scene. Bone dregs and remnant soul were all attached to the walls of the stone box. A ball of light was burning. That was the undying flame. It had also come from the ultimate zone of reincarnation and was related to the most fundamental substance of the phoenix. Within that ball of flame, Chu Feng's soul light and bloody mist melted with a sizzling sound. He was about to be completely destroyed, but he suddenly appeared at the last moment and erupted with exuberant vitality at the peak of destruction. It was like a wave of undying power that originated from the core of the flame. Following Chu Feng's reappearance, the undying flame dimmed and most of it disappeared. Don't tell me everything I brought out from the land of reincarnation is going to be consumed here? Chu Feng sighed. He was in a life and death situation. The fortunes he had found from the reincarnation cave were being consumed continuously. At this rate, nothing would be left. Previously, he still felt that he could obtain victory through quantity. Even if he couldn't obtain a complete 33-layered heaven's grass or a ball of flawless ascending immortal light, it would be enough if he could obtain a bit of every kind of fortune. He wouldn't be weaker than others and might even surpass them. Who would have thought that his fate would be filled with misfortune along the way? He actually died several times and relied on these heaven-defying substances to prolong his life. It was truly a pity and terrifying. It's coming again. Chu Feng's scalp went numb. Even if he did his best to seal the stone box, his body would still be crushed and his bones crushed in the process. This was grinding him to death while he was still alive. Again and again, the fortunes around him would be exhausted sooner or later. Moo! A wild ox roared. It belonged to a strange, desolate beast. Its origin power surged and dispersed here. It transformed into flowing light and surged with boundless vitality. Chu Feng was saved by this kind of origin power, but this strange, desolate beast's mysterious energy was also almost exhausted and dimmed. His face was full of bitterness. He had lost another kind of fortune. His entire body trembled. Symbols covered him densely, and divine chains of order stuck to the lid of the box. He strenuously resisted and wanted to seal that place. He could vaguely see a sea of flowing light outside. Divine radiance overflowed and a terrifying bird was flying about. When it opened its mouth, scarlet-red flames erupted. Magma poured out like a sea as it wanted to devour the stone box. Is that a great Tao fragment? He firmly believed that there wouldn't be any creatures on this path. With a wung sound, the stone box became increasingly brilliant and almost transparent. He saw that the so-called bird beak was actually a lump of red mist. It wrapped around the stone box and wanted to melt away this ultimate object. This made him suck in a breath of cold air. It was unknown just how many generations of evolution this stone box had experienced, yet it was still being attacked. There was something that wanted to destroy it. Chu Feng collapsed. After dying this time, only after a long time did he come back to life with the remaining roots of the 33-layered heaven's grass releasing vitality. It was just too difficult. One could well imagine how terrifying that lump of red mist was. Just like that, he staggered and tumbled along the way. He continuously died and revived. During this period of time, most of the essence and heaven and earth fortunes he brought with him were consumed. At first, he still remembered that he could be considered to have been reborn from 9 annihilations, but later on, he was annihilated 9 times and far surpassed that. Chu Feng went from being in unbearable pain at the beginning to numbness in the end. He simply didn't know how many times he had died. This was a painful journey and a great tribulation in life. His body and soul light disintegrating once was already considered a terrifying event. Now, he had endured too much. From pain to numbness, he once again experienced a life worse than death. It was like a cycle of suffering and reincarnation. Why aren't you numb to the end? He was about to collapse. Later on, his own perception became more and more acute. He couldn't remain numb and muddle-headed even if he wanted to. He was startled awake again and truly experienced the transformation and calamity between life and death. He didn't know when, but he seemed to have heard the sound of a tsunami and felt the boundless mortal chi. Was he about to arrive at his destination? Chu Feng woke up with a start. Through the translucent stone box, he saw a boundless ocean. Where had he arrived? Then, when a wave splashed up, all the phenomena of the mortal world rushed head-on. It was as if he had entered a country. In a split second, Chu Feng seemed to have experienced a lifetime and felt all kinds of things in the mortal world. Rumble! Another great wave struck and scattered that wave. A large world emerged and barged into his eyes. It was reflected in his mind. It was as if he had accepted another reincarnation and was walking in that world. Chu Feng was greatly moved. Reincarnation was indeed terrifying. When it came to this level, there were no small matters. What was he experiencing? Was he still on the path of reincarnation? A wave and a world of the mortal world. This was truly terrifying. Chapter 10:20. The box was changing shape and its appearance was changing. What kind of situation was this? Chu Feng was truly shocked. This box was shockingly sturdy, so how could it distort like this? It was known as an ultimate treasure that moved the hearts of the Yang realm's powerhouses. There were even a few heavenly venerables who personally opened up a path to the Yin realm, but they couldn't find it. This thing had been bombarded by the extreme martial before, but it was unharmed. It even fell into the abyss without any damage. Moreover, it had once passed through the foreign realm's boundary and could cross over. It had even crossed the Sea of Chaos and headed towards the broken universe, experiencing the bombardment of the heaven-opening lightning along the way, but it was still intact. In particular, even the reincarnation path couldn't do anything to it. Even the radiant city of Death's stone millstone couldn't crush it. How tough was it? But now it was out of shape. What had it become? Was it going to turn into a jar or a stone bottle? There was a sense of unfamiliarity. Chu Feng was tongue-tied. He didn't dare believe that the stone box was actually being pressured by an external force and gradually changing shape. Was it going to be destroyed? He was horrified. This final path of reincarnation was just too terrifying. Even this ancient artifact that had likely experienced several great eras and passed through several different evolutionary histories was going to be destroyed? Chu Feng was greatly moved. His heartstrings were taut, and he really didn't want it to shatter. How could an ultimate item be destroyed like this? What a pity! He was a bit regretful. He was too willful and caused a mysterious treasure to decline, never to be seen again in the world. The stone box distorted and changed more and more until it was unrecognizable. Had it become a stone bottle? There were some bumps and irregularities. He couldn't help but sigh. This path was so terrifying. It could really obliterate everything. Was a supreme heavenly object about to head towards the end of destruction? Buzz. The stone box shook violently. During this process, Chu Feng was killed once again. There wasn't much of the 6 paths of reincarnation left, so he was saved once again. It was a pity to continue consuming it like this. Chu Feng opened his eyes and discovered with astonishment that this translucent stone box could now be called a stone jar. The 6 intersections were smooth without any edges. Boom! In the outside world, great waves crashed over. Chu Feng experienced another great world of mortals, but he also felt the threat of death. The lid of the box gradually changed into a round shape instead of a square shape. At this time, even a wisp of aura that flowed in was enough to kill Chu Feng twice. The substance of good fortune in the jar prolonged his life, allowing him to resurrect with difficulty. Cauldron? Suddenly, Chu Feng was in a daze. The stone box changed shape, gradually turning into the shape of a cauldron. How strange! He felt like the situation wasn't right. It didn't seem like it was going to be destroyed, but rather that this ancient object was reviving, its form changing. It was still sturdy, still not breaking. Could it be that it was going to reveal its original appearance? Chu Feng suddenly thought of this possibility. Then, he was shocked. The stone box wasn't its true appearance, and only now was the tip of the iceberg gradually revealed. It was changing rapidly, becoming more and more like a cauldron. However, it did not have cauldron feet, nor did it have cauldron handles. Other than that, it looked like a small, round cauldron that was 3 inches tall. This! Chu Feng was dumbfounded. Things had actually developed to this extent. Perhaps it could be called a cauldron. This was its true appearance. The lid was round, and there was a small protrusion on it that could be lifted up by pinching it. It could be called a jar because even though it looked like a cauldron, it wasn't one after all. It was sparkling and translucent, but it also carried a simple and unadorned aura. White mist appeared in the surroundings, setting it off even more mysteriously. In the waves, red mist and purple light respectively corroded each other. They could destroy heaven and earth, cut apart the great world, and penetrate the great universe. However, when the red mist and purple light wrapped around each other, they couldn't do anything to the stone jar. A cauldron-like, small jar. Chu Feng felt that if he entered the Yang realm, even the celestial venerables and almighty figures who had come into contact with it wouldn't be able to recognize it. It was completely different. There were no edges and corners, and it looked very perfect. He believed that even if he walked in the great desolate lands, it would be fine to use it to cook the meat of vicious beasts and divine birds. No one could recognize it, so he didn't have to worry about exposing it. While Chu Feng was slightly distracted, he exploded again. Blood splashed into the cauldron jar. It was miserable, and the pain made him go crazy. This time, more than half of the last root of the 33-layer heaven's grass was used up. There was still a small piece left, and it might be able to save his life once. Is this the energy that seeped in specifically to kill me? Chu Feng sighed. He felt that he couldn't avoid it. If this continued, he would undoubtedly die. During this process, he discovered that some materials of creation could be preserved. Perhaps he himself was sturdy enough, but he wasn't that weak, was he? Rumble. Next, great waves surged into the heavens outside. All kinds of terrifying light spread out. That was the transformation of the great Tao, crushing everything. The endless mortal world was surging, and a terrifying secret force was released. Chu Feng couldn't stand it any longer. He felt that he might lose his life here and die on the road. In the ultimate land of reincarnation, I still had hope and saw the light of dawn, but now it's all despair. It's a bit sad. He shook his head. Reaching this step might be the end. The reincarnation of the fleshly body was strictly resisted and killed by the great Tao. No matter how he looked at it, it was impossible to succeed. However, if I defy the heavens and succeed in reincarnating, what will happen? What will happen? He felt that even in this most difficult situation, He should look forward to it and not give up completely. Rumble. The endless great waves disappeared. The cauldron pierced through. Chu Feng seemed to have experienced thousands of eras. He saw many worlds, experienced all kinds of vicissitudes, and came out. To be more precise, the cauldron successfully rushed out. Chu Feng had a misconception. Could it be that he had successfully reincarnated and already arrived in the world of the living? It was to the extent that he even had an absurd thought. Could this ocean that seemed to be formed from the mortal world be the so-called mother's amniotic fluid? He was in the process of reincarnation? It was a bit strange and incomparably absurd. He shook his head forcefully. In the process just now, the cauldron no longer changed shape. It was astonishingly sturdy, and all kinds of energy from the outside world, including great Tao fragments, couldn't do anything to it. Chu Feng was sure that this was its true form. In front of him, there was an expanse of darkness. He could vaguely see 6 ancient caves appear, and he was convinced that the so-called amniotic fluid theory wasn't reliable, and that his imagination was running wild. He truly felt a kind of power that surpassed the universe. Even though his body was in the cauldron, his heart still palpitated and he almost trembled. Multicolored flames pulsed, and the 6 colors were very hazy and terrifying. Chu Feng was astonished. Was this the reincarnation flames he saw in the purgatory? There were a few particularly terrifying clusters here, and they should be the source. It can most likely destroy everything. He sighed softly. Once this kind of thing contaminated the body of an evolver, he reckoned that no one would be able to withstand it. Vaguely, he saw blood flowing, and it was also of 6 different colors. It was very mysterious and frightening as it flowed between the 6 ancient caves. Chu Feng sucked in a breath of cold air. Was that the blood of 6 paths of reincarnation? It was produced here, and this place could be considered the source? With a buzz, the cauldron rushed in and sunk into darkness. Afterwards, the surroundings blazed brightly again. There were multicolored flames burning, and there was true blood flowing. This was fairly profound and terrifying. There were actually such things on the path of reincarnation. It was so complicated, and he had to experience so many things. He was a bit suspicious. If his soul was reincarnated, would he still have this kind of experience? He hadn't heard the little Taoist mention these things. Chu Feng pondered. If only his soul was reincarnated, it should be very smooth and he wouldn't see so many terrifying truths. His current level wasn't high enough, so he couldn't deduce anything. If there was a powerhouse here, he would definitely be able to deduce an incomparably terrifying essential clue. Chu Feng discovered that he passed through the 6 ancient caves and experienced them all once before finally falling. It was as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. Along the way, he suddenly became incomparably dazzling, as if he was starting to charge into an incomparably resplendent radiance. It was a very strange transformation, and also a very terrifying experience. It was excessively miraculous and contained suspense. It made one's heart palpitate. Suddenly, Chu Feng's entire body tensed up, and even his soul was trembling. He realized that something bad was about to happen. The cauldron shook violently as it encountered an unprecedented collision. In the outside world, it was pitch black like ink one moment, so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers in front of them. In the next, it was incomparably resplendent and illuminating the 9 heavens. The alternating was too fast. Moreover, a terrifying transformation was happening inside the stone box. After a trace of external aura rushed in, not only was his corporeal body exploding, but all kinds of materials of fortune were also exploding. The destruction this time targeted all materials. Chu Feng discovered that even something as powerful as the diamond chakram he had brought over, this rare mother of gold, was breaking apart as if it had melted and turned into many droplets of metal. There was no need to talk about his own body. He exploded into a bloody mist, and his bones turned into fine powder. All of this happened in an instant. It was the same for the other materials of fortune. None of them were intact. The roots of the 33-layered heaven's grass became a spiritual brilliance, and the blood of 6 paths of reincarnation evaporated and turned into mist. My seeds! Chu Feng's consciousness was in intense pain when he saw these things explode. Could the 3 seeds he had placed in the stone box still be preserved? Would they explode too? He was about to die at this juncture, and his body and soul were about to be extinguished, yet he actually had such thoughts. He was so insistent on caring about the seeds that even he himself felt stunned. Bang! The cauldron shook violently without end. The only thing that made Chu Feng pleasantly surprised and gratified was that although the roots of the 33-layered heaven's grass had exploded, their attributes hadn't changed. The spiritual essence was still there, and had taken the form of clouds and mist to nourish Chu Feng, allowing him to revive from the dead. Within the cauldron, all kinds of materials of fortune surged. Although there weren't many left, they still managed to revive Chu Feng several times. My heart feels like it's being twisted by a knife. He discovered that almost all the materials of fortune were gone. It was such a pity. Swoosh! At this moment, the material nature of the great Tao outside and the true supreme secret force had all disappeared. The so-called darkness and light no longer alternated and flickered. The cauldron broke free from its previous restraints and rushed out, becoming stable again. Chu Feng sensed the aura of the primordial world and immediately realized that he had most likely reached the world of the living and had charged out of the land of reincarnation. I'm here. I've successfully reincarnated. What will I become? He was excited. Bang! However, just when he thought everything had calmed down and he had broken free from the terrifying destructive force of the land of reincarnation, a beam of light flew over from behind and drowned the cauldron. Chu Feng cried out. All the materials of fortune had been used up. If he died this time, could he still come back to life? In an instant, he disintegrated. His vision turned black and he couldn't see anything. Had he reincarnated or had he died? Chu Feng had cursed him at the very last moment. He had actually given him such a blow at the last moment. In the world of the living, there was a country in the Dong Sheng divine continent called Aolai Country. There was a mountain near the sea called Chapter 10:21. This place was known as Flower Fruit Mountain. Beautiful trees were verdant and green, flowing with green light. There were many strange fruits produced on the mountain, and pollen pervaded the air all year round. It was known for its ability to promote the evolution of creatures. It was adjacent to the sea, and one could see the silver ocean rise and fall. The beasts in the sea were as large as mountains, and they would appear from time to time. In the vicinity of Flower Fruit Mountain, spiritual energy surged and light flowed like a tide, carrying exuberant vitality. Scarlet multicolored light streaked about and purple mist surged. Yang energy in particular surged, nourishing all living things. In this area there were strange rocks and cliffs, and the Ganoderma ginseng was rooted between the stone peak. Dense and pure mist coiled around it, and its fragrance assaulted the nose. There were longevity deer and golden foxes in the mountains. Their fur shone and their cultivation was profound. On the trees there were spiritual birds and mysterious cranes with bright and beautiful feathers. Their evolution levels were all extremely high, and there was no lack of auspicious and sacred bird. Here, the terrain concealed the mysteries of heaven and earth. There were domains laid down by the disciples of almighty figures and Tao children left behind by Empyreans to protect them. All of the creatures in the mountains had gained intelligence and were paying close attention to the direction of the mountain peak, waiting for the birth of the Holy Spirit. Oh, the founder of my sect once said that the birth of a heavenly embryo is only lacking a lucky chance. When the heavens and the earth are at peace, a strand of fortune energy from the era of creation will descend, and the embryo will be born. An old fox spoke, its fur shining with golden light. This was a holy fox. In the nearby area, there were many spiritual life forms standing guard, acting as the eyes and ears of certain empyreans and great elders. There was even no lack of divine birds and auspicious beasts. On this day, a wisp of flowing light appeared in the sky. It swooped down with extreme speed, causing heaven and earth to tremble violently. The great Tao rumbled, and it shattered the peace of this place. No one could see clearly what it was. Primal chaos covered everything, everything hazy as it descended. Boom! Doubtlessly, the super domain protecting Mount Huagua had been activated and triggered. This caused the sky and earth to turn upside down. Runes interweaved in the sky and violet chi spread out for 15,000 kilometers. There was a mountain-protecting domain laid down by a disciple of a supreme existence here. After an intense great collision, that streak of light fled. Meanwhile, a strand of natural luck descending into the mountain. When everything calmed down, it was as if nothing had happened. Everything was just as peaceful as before. In the world, time flowed by. Between Flower and Fruit Mountain, the ancient trees were verdant and glistening. Medicinal herbs covered the ground, flowing with light and vibrant colors. The mountain was majestic and towering. The cliff walls were translucent like jade. There were also simple and unadorned stone tablets with inscriptions and other things that emitted a primordial aura. At the center of the mountain peak was a strange stone with 9 apertures and 8 emptiness. It could sense the essence of the sun and the moon, and the world was beautiful. Auspicious light shone in hundreds and thousands, shooting out day and night. Nearby, regardless of whether it was the rocks or the earth, they were all sparkling and lustrous, carrying the rich essence of heaven and earth. Life energy overflowed and flourished. Wu, the heavenly deity, sensed something, saying that this place has been sensed by natural luck, that a creature is about to emerge. New protectors appeared here, their evolution levels extremely high. They came from all over, some of them children under heavenly deities, as well as vicious beasts raised by great beings. These people's expressions were serious. They were all interested in the stone egg here, waiting for it to appear. They all wanted to take it as a disciple. The strange stone was nourished by the heavenly splendor and nurtured by the essence of the earth veins. As time passed, it gradually gained sentience and gave birth to a heavenly embryo. Dao as, and n2, old. And as time time. Nearby, regardless of whether it was the swan ni with golden fur or the scarlet-winged black sparrow, they were all guarding the stone, watching the changes. One had to understand that it was rare for an empyrean to appear. Now, someone had woken up and was paying attention to this place from a distant place. As for the great powers, they were even more so legends of evolution. Many ancient and dazzling golden eras had passed, but no traces of them could be found. They rarely appeared. It was to the extent where in the current era, there were some who doubted if the great powers of history truly existed. However, there were 3 or 4 great powers who had arranged for servants to fight over the heavenly core. They wanted to take it in as their last disciple. As a result, during this period of time, Dongxing Divine Continent's atmosphere was tense and strange. Even the great powers were alarmed and wanted to fight over disciples. That day, the blazing sun was high in the sky. Golden crows cried and blinding radiance scattered down, surrounding Flower and Fruit Mountain. The yang energy was extremely rich. The stone's 9 orifices were frantically absorbing essence energy. It was wrapped in yang energy. It was about to appear. Kacha. The stone body cracked apart. Then, divine light rushed into the heavens. Following a violent tremor, the entire mountain region rumbled and erupted with terrifying brilliance like a volcano eruption. With a hong sound, the stone core appeared and surged into the sky. This was a heavenly core. It was born with divine abilities and irregular scenes. It came into the world with innate divine abilities. Otherwise, the various sect ancestors wouldn't have paid attention to it, and those top figures wouldn't have rushed over to take it in as a disciple. This was a stone person with 9 orifices. It opened up against the wind and automatically absorbed yang energy, condensing energy into matter. Its entire body was incomparably dazzling. The stone body transformed into flesh and blood, transforming into a normal creature. Moreover, at this moment its aura surged. When it raised its eyes, 2 golden beams of light broke through the heavens. It was born with the fiery eyes. It gazed into outer space and into the great wasteland. For a moment, even the ancestors of a few supreme evolutionary orthodoxies that had existed for hundreds of millions of years were alarmed. All the experts who were paying attention to this place were shaken. The fiery eyes could actually be innately born? They were stunned. Even in the Yang realm, in this vast and boundless great earth, those who possessed the fiery eyes were extremely rare. It was because it was too difficult to obtain them. There were some who obtained a special bloodline through coincidence and the assistance of a great figure, thus producing the fiery eyes. Meanwhile, there were some who risked their lives by entering the revered 8 trigrams furnace and experiencing death. Only then did a pair of fiery eyes appear. Of course, under this type of method, 99% of heaven-warping geniuses were burned to death. It was difficult to succeed. As a result, this heavenly core was born with the fiery eyes, leaving the heavenly deities and great figures who were paying attention to this place shocked. They attached more and more importance to it. Disciple! A dignified voice sounded from beyond the heavens, about to guide the heavenly core away. Someone seized the initiative to take action. Stop! My sect has protected this stone core for who knows how many years and has long viewed it as a disciple. You all are not allowed to seize it. A vicious bird roared. This was a 9-headed bird. When its wings spread out, they covered the blue sky like dark clouds. A large area of shadow was cast on the ground, giving everyone a feeling of endless pressure. This is a great figure's last disciple. All of you back off. A vicious beast appeared, berating everyone. My ancestor is a great figure. Who are you telling to back off? An old wolf appeared. Its entire body was snow-white, looking down on everyone. Immediately afterwards, they took action, directly confronting each other. All of them fought over that stone core in an extremely domineering manner. These inheritances were all willing to take it as a disciple. In that instant, the super domains here all began to cry softly, releasing sparkling symbol light. If not for this place would have immediately been destroyed, seawater pouring in. At the crucial moment, a large pitch-black hand reached down from the heavens, grabbing towards Flower Fruit Mountain to bring away that stone core. There was no way the great figures would take action. Even though they wanted to take it as a disciple, they weren't in a rush to the point where they personally took action. Their disciples were going to guide this stone core in their place. Honglong. There were also heavenly deities who personally took action, full of confidence. They actually dared to fight over a disciple with a great figure. As long as the great figure hiding in the famed mountains didn't personally rush over, there wasn't much to be scared of. It was because this heavenly deity's master was still alive, sleeping for endless years. In this region, several large hands collided in the heavens above. The scene was terrifying. That was the interweaving of natural order. The great Tao of heaven and earth rumbled, all of them displaying top-level combat skills. This stone core has karma with my master. Everyone, there is no need to fight over it. Let's go. Someone spoke, descending. He produced a small white jade bridge that suspended itself between Flower Fruit Mountain and the horizon, carrying him and that heavenly core into the distance. During this process, everyone else took action one after another. There were even heavenly deities who descended, fiercely taking action, but none of them could stop this. When the large hands landed, it was like striking a bubble, completely useless. This is the true realm-crossing bridge, a supreme treasure of the Yang realm. Someone sucked in a cold breath of air, and then he released a light sigh, carrying disappointment and frustration. He knew that he couldn't seize the heavenly core he wanted, that it had already brushed past him. This type of ideal disciple was likely going to become a great figure in the future. Heaven and earth became peaceful. The disturbance of fighting over a disciple ended, and that heavenly core obtained the sex inheritance, going to pay respects to a master. Chapter 10:22. The wind stirred up the stone mountain. The heavenly embryo hatched, startling the world. On this day, the Dongxing divine continent was shaken. The 9 orifices stone man had actually appeared. His aura was like a bull, and his eyes were fiery and golden. Beams of light shot into the 9 heavens, causing a huge commotion. This was the aptitude of an Empyrean. Perhaps he could even become a great figure, and in the future, he would be able to look down on the great wastelands. In the future, he would definitely be able to protect an area, and allow the glory of his orthodoxy to illuminate the world. My Dongxing divine prefecture has given birth to a heavenly child, which is a sign of great prosperity. It will pour down fragments of the great Tao like rain. Next, there will be an increase in the number of mutant fruits in the mountains and rivers, and pollen will fly everywhere. Perhaps it will usher in a golden age of evolution. Someone sighed in admiration. His voice was like a great bell that shook the heavens. This was the disciple of a certain powerful being from the East Victory Divine Prefecture. He could also be considered an ancient existence with unfathomable strength. The Yu province is in trouble. It's adjacent to the Dongxing Divine Continent. It won't be a good thing if the Yu province loses and the Yu province grows. There was an Empyrean who woke up. His eyes were deep as he looked towards Yu province, coming to this conclusion. In an instant, many streaks of lightning appeared in the sky, interweaving between the Yu province and the Dongxing Divine Continent. These were all gazes. Some unfathomable existences had awakened and were paying attention to the 2 provinces. Evolvers of this level possessed boundlessly terrifying strength and possessed powerful breathing technique. Once they appeared and walked the earth, they would be worshipped by all races. There were some Empyreans who had remained dormant for endless years, long forgotten by the world. They were waiting for their declining bodies to transform, not daring to act blindly without thinking, not willing to exhaust their life force. However, a few terrifying creatures awakened today, paying close attention to the matters between the 2 provinces. He really isn't simple. He was born with the fiery golden eyes. This is a peerless talent. Even this old man cherishes his talent and wants nothing more than to take him as my last disciple. At this level, it was not easy to find someone who could truly inherit his legacy. Some existences hoped that a disciple of their liking would rise up and become an expert of the same level as them after they grew old. This way, they could live out their remaining years in peace. Otherwise, no matter how high and mighty one was, once one reached the end of one's life, it was possible that one would be targeted by others and become prey. The strong preyed on the weak. Even top-notch evolvers had to face a cruel environment. Even the heavenly deities had to guard against old age. Even though they were great figures, once their blood energy showed signs of declining, they still had to hold back. Otherwise, it would be extremely dangerous. If one was strong enough, who would fight for disciples? Just rely on yourself. That old fella from Yu province is definitely silent, right? He guarded that place for so many years, being too merciful and lenient. What happened in the end? If the neighboring Dongxing Divine Continent rises, he won't have a good time. Oh, there's no need to think too much. The one from Yu province is in trouble. That person from the Dongxing Divine Prefecture has always been ruthless. In a decade or two, when the balance between the two prefectures is broken, he will definitely take action. Some big shots were talking. In the impoverished Yu province, there was an old man who had always been guarding there. He had once mentioned in private that he had a premonition that an evolver who could shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries would emerge from that province in the future. He would look down on the world. Moreover, his decline might be reversed by the appearance of the evolved beings in the future. At that time, there were many strong people living in the Dongxing Divine Continent. Someone once ridiculed the elder of Yu Prefecture, saying that he didn't know when to advance or retreat, that he didn't understand the mysteries of heaven, and that it was unreasonable for him to blindly protect Yu Prefecture. Now, a heavenly embryo had appeared in the Dongxing Divine Continent. Comparatively speaking, this was the start of a change of fortune for the Yu province. Yu Shang, you've declined too quickly, unable to see the situation clearly, unable to even understand what is happening behind you. You're slow to react, a bit slow. As expected, a strong person from the Dongxing Divine Prefecture spoke and ridiculed the old man from Yu province. Yu Shang, I advise you to use Yu province as a sacrifice and place it on the sacrificial table. We'll be more or less lenient towards you, someone else said. These simple words revealed part of the cruel and terrifying truth. If it were to spread to the desolate lands of the Yang realm, it would cause tsunami-like waves. The heavenly embryo hasn't finished his apprenticeship and might not rise to power. He might not necessarily be invincible in the nearby prefectures. I, Yu Shang, have never lowered my head in my entire life, said the old man from Yu province. Heh, you still want to protect Yu province? All right then, continue. We'll see the results in a decade or two. Haha, don't tell me you really think an evolver who can shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries will emerge from Yu province? Old man Yu Shang, you've really declined to a certain extent. Your senses towards the great Tao and the future are becoming weaker and weaker. In Yu province, Elder Yu Shang was silent. He had nothing to say at this juncture. He felt powerless and was filled with exhaustion. Let's wait and see. Me and a few Evolver Tao friends will quietly wait for Yu province to recover and for a fierce person to emerge. Haha! Someone laughed loudly and ridiculed. In reality, no one was optimistic about Yu province. In the nearby territories, all the evolvers who were paying attention to this matter were sighing. They felt that Elder Yu Shang's flame of life was flickering and would most likely be extinguished in a decade or two. His early predictions were wrong. There was a stone egg hatching in the Dongxing Divine Continent and the birth of a heavenly embryo. This was a sign of great prosperity, and there might be another powerhouse. Yu province was originally barren, so what could they use to compare? No one believed that a powerful and fierce person would appear in Yu province. They didn't possess that kind of soil for evolution. Don't jump to conclusions so easily. I heard that Elder Yu Shang's master might still be alive and hasn't died completely. Perhaps he can give him a hand at the crucial moment. Someone said, but his voice wasn't loud and carried an uncertain tone. Forget it. There are secrets to this. It involves the bloody disaster and great war of the ancient powerhouses. It's better not to mention it. Moreover, there's no need to hold any hope. After that, the world became silent. No one was talking about it anymore because they were all feeling restraining fear. At this moment, Chu Feng was somewhat muddle-headed. He tried to open his golden eyes in a hazy state, but his soul light swayed and was extremely dim, as if it would be extinguished at any time. He discovered to his horror that he didn't have a corporeal body. Where was this? The surroundings were quiet and dark. He seemed to be locked up in a cage, as if he had slept for as long as several epochs. Very soon, he figured out his own state. All that was left was a lump of blood essence that was still sparkling and translucent. This was the last of his corporeal body's essence. Everything else had been obliterated. Is this the inside of the stone box? He asked himself. He gradually focused his soul light and condensed it into that lump of splendid blood. His own state was much better, and he discovered that he was indeed inside the stone box. Perhaps it could be called a stone jar now. It was 3 inches tall, simple and unadorned like a cauldron. He didn't act blindly without thinking. He recalled his experience of reincarnation. Did he fail to reincarnate with his corporeal body? Why didn't it appear in his mother's body? Why was it still inside the ultimate treasure? He thought about the various things on the path of reincarnation and the ultimate land. It was truly terrifying and mysterious. The process of reincarnation was too horrifying. Those scenes and fragments were truly unimaginable. Without a doubt, if those things were sensed by the powerhouses or experienced them personally, they would definitely deduce part of the terrifying truth. Chu Feng sighed softly. What exactly had gone wrong? Was it because he had a corporeal body that he couldn't smoothly reincarnate? He remembered something. After he charged out from the end of reincarnation, he suffered another blow at the last moment and exploded in the stone coffin. At that time, the 33-layered heaven's grass, 6 paths of reincarnation blood, and other things that came out of the ultimate land were almost completely consumed. There was very little left, so it was very difficult for him to quickly recover. Moreover, the lid of the stone jar had loosened at that moment. As a result, a strand of the remaining substance of creation had spilled out, almost making him unable to come back to life. Yes, at that moment I sensed through the cracks of the stone jar that I was going to reincarnate. In a hazy state, I saw a 9-orifice stone embryo gestating in the strange stone through the translucent jar. Is that where I'm going to reincarnate? Chu Feng was suspicious. His soul light formed a body, and his expression became increasingly unsightly. That was because at the last moment, there was an ultimate domain that blasted him away. In reality, the stone jar had also been blasted away once again because of the rune's bombardment. The substance of creation in the stone jar leaked out and that stone embryo obtained a strand? Chu Feng muttered to himself. You almost caused me to die. You owe me great karma. He even suspected that if it wasn't for the mysterious domain obstructing him, he might have reincarnated into the stone egg. Chu Feng broke out into a cold shiver. He really didn't want to become a 9-orifice stone man, even if he seemed to be extraordinarily talented, terrifying, and extraordinary. Where did I land? He felt that he was definitely far away from the mountain where the 9-orifice stone man was born. At that time, the stone jar had been blasted away and directly disappeared into the void, traversing the boundless territory. In reality, those creatures that were protecting the heavenly embryo had sensed something. They saw a ball of hazy light swooping down with primal chaos chi. Then, a great collision occurred, and in the end, a wisp of flowing light escaped. That wisp of flowing light was the stone jar. Can this be considered as me sneaking into the world of the living? Chu Feng laughed. Even though his soul light was in intense pain, he still couldn't help but feel happy. Who would have thought that reincarnating from the ultimate place of reincarnation could actually be like this? He didn't enter his mother's womb, but directly appeared in his corporeal form. He didn't open the stone jar because he needed to restore his corporeal body as soon as possible. He wanted to reappear. However, when his soul light flickered and he was in the process of being reborn from a drop of blood, Chu Feng couldn't help but cry out in alarm. He, who was originally as steady as a lofty mountain, lost his composure now. Who am I? What's going on? He simply didn't dare to believe it. Right now, he was looking at his reborn pair of hands. He shook his head with all his might and felt that the wind was messy inside the stone jar. Chapter 10:23. White and tender, a pair of little buns. This was a bit of an eyesore. Chu Feng couldn't believe it. What happened to his hands? They were meaty. When had they ever been so fat? The most outrageous thing was that they weren't small. They were pocket-sized and pitifully small. They were a pair of children's hands, fat like a ball. He felt uncomfortable all over. He immediately realized his state. He looked like he was 6 or 7 years old. His whole body was white, clean, and round. He had become a little white fatty. He swore that he had never been fat since he was a child. "Ah!" he shouted. His voice was so tender that he almost slapped himself. Was he trying to act cute? Absolutely not. This was his real voice. He understood the situation. He had died many times in the stone coffin and was saved by the good fortune substance. There were obviously remnants of the longevity medicine that made him grow in reverse. However, this kind of rejuvenation was really shameful. How did he become a little fat boy? Usually, his palms were very slender. Now, when he stretched them out, they were chubby and looked like 2 little buns. Chu Feng used the mirror light spell to illuminate his whole body. He was about to collapse. He was meaty, white, and clean. He had become a charmingly naive little fatty. Especially when he smiled, his eyes were slightly narrowed. His eyes were almost invisible. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he couldn't. Where were his clear and bright big eyes? They were gone. After smiling, they became 2 slits. Little fatty! Chu Feng gnashed his teeth. However, it looked like the meaty little fatso was pretending to be angry. He was pretending to be deep and shamelessly acting cute. Damn you! Chu Feng flew into a rage out of humiliation. He punched the mirror light. However, through the mirror light spell, he saw a meaty little fatso. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws, but he couldn't show his fierce temperament. When Chu Feng faced the mirror light, he was about to collapse. If this was seen by someone he knew, he wouldn't want to live anymore. He staggered backward. He looked dizzy as if he was drunk, which made the little fat boy look even more charmingly naive. Damn, it hurt his eyes. Chu Feng couldn't stand his state. Because he wanted to pinch his meaty little face. This thought was too shameful. Change back, I want to recover. He beat his chest and stamped his feet, continuously tossing and turning, wanting to reconstruct his flesh. He unexpectedly discovered that there was rich energy within his fair flesh. What's going on? Can't it be wasted? This was the accumulation of mystical power, a kind of accumulation. Chu Feng was furious. He sat on the ground, quite dissatisfied. He was really a bit angry and was trying to think of a solution. Then, he was a little teary-eyed when he saw the chubby and tender little boy in the mirror kicking his legs like an unreasonable person. He was just short of rolling on the ground. I'm great demon Chu. I look down upon the netherworld with disdain, and I kill until the gods retreat. Ghosts weep and gods howl. If I were to be seen by others now, what a scandal! He wanted to cry. What had he become? In particular, he could see very clearly that every movement was so out of place. It was too different from his past style and aura. It made him want to beat up that little fatso. He really wanted to slap himself, but the pain was on his own body. He had reincarnated, crossed over by accident, and ended up like this. It was too shameful. Chu Feng cautiously opened the lid of the jar. He didn't know what was going on outside. The jar was no longer translucent, and he couldn't see the scenery outside. In a split second, he let out a blood-curdling scream. His whole body was burning, and he was in agony from the scorching fire. Even his soul light was surging and fluctuating violently. Chu Feng quickly closed the jar. His whole body was covered in fire. To be precise, it was yang qi. It was so dense that it actually burned him. This shocked him. He was a divine king, but in the end, he began to self-immolate after reincarnating into the world of the living? His face turned green as he let his imagination run wild. Could it be that the ultimate land of reincarnation was settling accounts with him? The matter wasn't over yet, right? Chu Feng thought of all kinds of possibilities. He found it hard to forget the series of terrifying and strange experiences he had on the path of reincarnation. It was filled with evil and all kinds of mysteries. It was originally a land of reincarnation, but it even had the red dust sea and the 33-layered heavens grass. It was truly an extraordinary aura. I've become a little thinner? He was stunned. After a period of suffering, his body wasn't so bloated anymore. Chu Feng pondered. Logically speaking, he had already reincarnated into the world of the living and successfully avoided death. It was only normal that he wouldn't be targeted again. Oh, I understand now. It's because I also moved my corporeal body over. I walked through the path of reincarnation, and before entering that whirlpool, I was contaminated with a large amount of Yin-Chi matter. What place was denser with Yin-Chi than the netherworld? What place was more mysterious than the ultimate land of reincarnation? He had brought his corporeal body all the way here, so it was inevitable that he had accumulated dense Yin-Chi energy. It could even be said that this kind of special matter was many times more than the total amount he had accumulated in the universe where Earth was. So, as soon as I arrived in the world of the living, it was as if heavenly lightning had stirred up the flames of the earth, triggering an intense backlash. The Yang Qi wanted to burn a Yin spirit like me? The rules of the world of the living are really perfect. It's not simple. Chu Feng felt a lot more at ease. As long as the ultimate land of reincarnation didn't settle accounts with him, everything was fine. He had been tormented and scared along the way. Those experiences made him feel a lingering fear even now. When he opened the lid of the jar again, a wave of flames directly rushed in and burned Chu Feng until he grimaced in pain. His corporeal body made sizzling sounds and Yin mist rose. He was a little scared. No matter how he looked at it, it seemed like he was burning a Yin corpse. There was actually Yin Qi filling the air. Was his corporeal body so terrifying? In the world of the living, he really did seem like a ghost. However, he was a divine king, so how could he feel this kind of pain? Chu Feng rushed out and understood the situation. He was underground and the magma was boiling. At the same time, there was a strange ball of fire that enveloped this place and burned him and the stone jar. Without a doubt, when the stone jar flew over the land of the living, it crashed into the depths of the ground. He immediately understood that there was a ball of ineffable fire here. It was originally in the world of the living, and with the addition of the strange flame, it was impossible for him not to suffer. Whoosh! Chu Feng took the stone jar and decisively ran towards the surface. If he had a heavenly eye, he could see a little white fatso running away sneakily. He rushed out of the ground and appeared on the great desolate land. As soon as he emerged from the surface, Chu Feng didn't have time to experience the vastness of the world of the living and the vastness of the earth when his scalp went numb. A blazing light flashed in the sky and with a boom, a bolt of lightning struck down and charred his entire body black. Even the corners of his mouth were twitching. Is Fatso so unlikable? He was furious. He had just appeared in the world of the living and suffered a stun stick. It was too painful and made him extremely unhappy. With a whoosh, his entire body was ignited by that lightning. That was because lightning was the most masculine substance and was even more terrifying than the yang energy roaming between heaven and earth. Chu Feng felt a headache. This was simply the most painful torture. He raised his head to look at the sky. It wasn't raining and the sky was clear, but there was actually thunder. Boom! Another bolt of lightning fell and struck him until his vision went black. His entire body spasmed as arcs of electricity overflowed in all directions. This really wasn't a beautiful memory and experience. He immediately realized that this wasn't lightning that came for no reason. It was a heavenly punishment. as a guest from the netherworld, he had escaped from the ultimate land of reincarnation. The Een energy around him was dense, and he was sensed by the laws of this desolate land and was punished. To the world of the living, he was an evildoer who had just come from the netherworld and was bound to be struck by lightning. Just like some old beasts in the mountains who had become spirits, they had to first pass the lightning tribulation if they wanted to evolve successfully. This is discrimination. What happened to all life being equal and the 10,000 worlds being one? You taught me my first lesson just like that. Although he said this, his heart was like a mirror. He had escaped from the depths of the netherworld, so it would be abnormal if he wasn't struck by lightning. Chi. A bolt of lightning that was a mixture of black and white fell, causing Chu Feng's expression to change. He turned around and rushed underground, but he was still struck and exploded in the depths of the earth. That was yin and yang lightning that blended together. It was extremely terrifying. Even though Chu Feng possessed the body of a divine monarch, he still couldn't endure it and was almost blasted to death. Only after a very long time did Chu Feng reassemble his corporeal body and soul light. He had a lingering fear in his heart because he had just entered the world of the living and wasn't recognized by this desolate land. It was truly dangerous. This wasn't as simple as crossing a tribulation, but rather a kind of indescribable great Tao fragment flowing to strangle a creature like him that had escaped from reincarnation. He pondered that he should eliminate the Yin energy in his body as soon as possible and make himself no different from the creatures of this world, so that he could accept the surging Yang Qi baptism. Or perhaps he could walk the path of the strongest and also not fear the corresponding heavenly tribulation. Strange, there aren't any creatures crossing a tribulation. Could it be an earth dragon turning over? Someone on the ground spoke. Those were two hunters who had passed through this mountainous region and came over to observe. Chu Feng was astonished. The hunters in the world of the living were all evolvers who weren't weak. They were much stronger than ordinary people. They really weren't simple. He needed to have a good understanding of this untainted land. To him, this was a very strange and vast world. It's a little strange. Is the terrain of this mountain range very astonishing, or is the land of the living extraordinary in the first place? It's actually able to protect me from being struck by lightning. Chu Feng was astonished. He waited for a very long time, but there was no lightning descending. This was fine as well. He could avoid attracting the attention of the outside world and being discovered by others. However, he indeed needed to cross a tribulation. However, he couldn't do it under circumstances where the sky was as clear as 10,000 miles away. Instead, he should choose a stormy day to conceal it. Chu Feng thought about it and ran into the depths of the ground again. He wanted to use that ball of special earth fire to refine the Yin energy in his body. He didn't necessarily have to baptize himself with the lightning tribulation. The magma in the depths of the ground flickered with scarlet light and contained scorching yang qi. There was even a ball of bright red earth fire that bloomed there like an orchid. In the vicinity, all the rock walls and walls were black and carried a faint black light. This is really torture. Chu Feng took the initiative to burn himself and grimaced in pain. For a moment, his flesh and blood were on fire. His soul light crackled as he refined a large area of Yin mist. He felt that this was simply self-torture, but he had no choice but to carry it out. This wasn't something that could be accomplished in one go. He had to carry it out slowly. Otherwise, Chu Feng would definitely be burned into charcoal. This ball of earth fire was clearly extraordinary. Just like that, Chu Feng burned himself for a period of time every day. The Yin energy gradually decreased. Oh, I've actually lost weight in disguise? He was astonished to discover that he had already slimmed down in just over 10 days. He was no longer a little fatty. Smelt again, burn again. After a few more days, Chu Feng was about to cry. Not only had he become thinner, but he had also become smaller. He had turned from 6 or 7 years old to 4 or 5 years old. The materials of fortune in his body, such as the residual medicinal properties of the 33-layered heavens grass, were still taking effect and hadn't completely disappeared. This kind of rejuvenation was somewhat terrifying. A month later, Chu Feng's face had turned green. He had already turned into the appearance of a 2-year-old. He staggered along, and it was impossible for him not to be innocent and pure. However, he really wanted to say that this kind of attitude was too king shameful. I don't believe in heresy. Can you rejuvenate me to the point where I'm no longer young? I really want to see what kind of state I'll be in the end. Chapter 10:24. Another 20 days passed. Chu Feng was about to cry. He was really shrinking into a 1-year-old baby with obvious baby fat and a face full of collagen. I'm Demon King Chu. He waved his arms with all his might, but his fierce appearance was actually quite laughable. He sat down on the ground with a face full of worry. What should he do? Could it be that he would disappear in the end after returning to his youth? Should he continue to gamble? This baby's face was full of baby collagen and chubby. He was clearly worried, but he seemed to be absent-minded and didn't seem to be in the slightest. During the last 2 months, he had refined the dense yin energy in his body. It had decreased quite a bit, but it hadn't been completely eliminated. One could imagine how terrifying the energy would be when he charged into the ultimate land of reincarnation. Boom! There was a violent tremor as some movement occurred on the ground. Chu Feng was moved. The thunderstorm was coming again, so he could go outside and deal with the problem as soon as possible. Swoosh! He crawled out of the ground and looked up. Lightning and thunder rumbled as rain poured down heavily. Crack! As expected, he didn't even need to take the initiative to guide the lightning. The heavenly tribulation had arrived and smashed down on his face with brilliant lightning. Chu Feng grimaced in pain. He had been refined underground by that strange flame for 2 months, but in the end, he was still struck by lightning. It was truly terrifying. Before long, his skin was lacerated and his whole body was pitch black. Lightning shot out from his small body and his organs were entwined with lightning. Even his bone marrow was flowing with electricity. The so-called collagen, the so-called baby fat, had all been chopped to a crisp. TSK, you scoundrel who controls lightning, do you still have any shame? You're bullying even a baby. You're not a thing. Chu Feng's skin was very thick as he cursed. Of course, he felt that his skin was too thin. After all, he had become a baby. I'm going to be struck to death. Lightning, you scoundrel! He resisted with all his might. Then, he was somewhat astonished. A large area of yin mist rose up amidst the lightning and was destroyed by the masculine energy. However, there was still more coming out of his body. Just how much had come out of the ultimate land? From the looks of it, one tribulation wouldn't be able to disperse all of it. He had really become a yin corpse in the yang realm. As expected, when the rain was about to stop and the normal lightning was about to disappear, he was still densely packed with thunder and lightning. Chu Feng hid deep underground and paused his tribulation. He didn't want to attract the attention of the evolvers. He couldn't be exposed before he completely merged into the yang realm. Especially since a divine king-level infant was undergoing tribulation. If this got out, it would be enough to shock the masses. It would draw the ancestors to appear and dissect him for research. Deep underground, Chu Feng was contemplating the pros and cons as well as his future path. I want to walk the path of the strongest. This won't do. From awakening, shackle, to my current God-King realm middle stage, there are flaws in every realm. Chu Feng pondered while tidying up the items in the stone box. He wanted to see if there were any remnants of the fortune substance. This kind of item was too precious. He reckoned that the 33-layered heaven's grass and the 6 paths of reincarnation blood played a major role in his transformation. Unfortunately, he had used up all of the creation materials. A pile of shiny, snow-white metal lumps made him sigh. This was the diamond chakram, broken beyond recognition. That was a rare type of mother gold. In the end, it couldn't bear the pressure on the way to reincarnation and was damaged beyond recognition. In comparison, the stone box was too heaven-defying. Additionally, there was a pile of silver metal. Chu Feng was startled and said in astonishment, "This is the silver paper left behind by the sage master." On it was recorded all kinds of knowledge regarding domains and the profundities of heaven and earth. This metal paper was extraordinary to be able to leave it behind. The energy pagoda on the moon had once said that the sage master had obtained this paper by accident and that most of his knowledge came from it. Unfortunately, there was only one page. They guessed that it was most likely a piece of paper from a certain scripture. It seemed that the silver paper had a great origin. Most of the other things had been destroyed and turned to ashes. The final collision after crossing the ultimate land of reincarnation was like the end of the world. All living things were destroyed. The small grinding stone is still here. How odd, Chu Feng muttered to himself. He checked his body's condition and found that a gray grinding stone had reappeared after 2 months of condensation. It was originally a black and white grinding stone, but it had already turned gray after absorbing some special origin materials. These so-called special materials originated from the strangeness and inauspiciousness. After being strangled, they returned to their origins and became a special origin material. It was actually so astonishing. Even the ultimate land of reincarnation couldn't erase it. Chu Feng sank into silence. He was flipping through the letter written by the stone fox Celestial Venerable's master in his mind. He wanted to walk the most powerful path. There were many methods, but all of them had to be nurtured from a young age. Although he had reincarnated this time, it was different from ordinary reincarnations. He still had his cultivation. Even in the Yang realm, he couldn't be considered a weak evolver. I need to start all over again. How should I proceed? In this life, he wanted to become a peak expert. Naturally, he had to tread a different path. He couldn't allow the 8th god Crimson to cross 2 realms to compete with him again. From domains to the most powerful letter to the breathing techniques of various races, Chu Feng pondered for 3 days. His mind was in chaos. There were some vague ideas, but they were all too risky. Forget it, I'll burn away the yin energy in my body first. Chu Feng burned himself underground with the ball of fire for over 50 days. He shrunk once again into a 10-month-old baby, which made him tremble with fear. Was he really going to burn himself into nothingness? The 33-layered heaven's grass and the 6 paths of reincarnation blood were too tyrannical. They made him feel a headache and speechless. Finally, he burned himself to the final stage. The yin mist spread out in large areas and rarely appeared again. His body also stopped shrinking. He was now an 8-month-old baby. Damn, I've finally stopped growing. Although he was so angry that he cursed, he still spoke in a childish voice. This made Chu Feng's face darken with baby fat. He immediately shut his mouth and wasn't willing to speak again. After waiting for a few days, another thunderstorm came. Chu Feng climbed to the surface and began to transcend the tribulation once more. As expected, the lightning became much gentler. The yin energy in his body wasn't so dense anymore and could be said to be rather thin. In the end, before the thunderstorm stopped, there was no more yin energy emitting from his flesh and soul light. I've finally reached perfection. I've become a person from the Yang realm. Chu Feng let out a long sigh. However, he felt that it definitely wasn't so simple. He had come from a place of extreme yin and had rushed through reincarnation. He was accompanied by a gargantuan secret. Evolvers from the Yang realm went to the Yin realm for the so-called balance of Yin and Yang and to search for the Yin and Yang seed. Without a doubt, Chu Feng didn't need to consider this problem at all. He had reached the highest level in terms of absorbing Yin matter. Just as his mind wandered into the universe and he was considering his future path, there was a violent tremor with a loud bang. A terrifying blood-colored lightning descended with a wisp of primal chaos mist and struck him until he exploded. Chu Feng's vision darkened and his soul light scattered. He was sure that he had injured his evolutionary foundation. This was too ruthless. His flesh and soul light fragments rushed into the ground to hide at the first possible moment. However, it was very terrifying this time. The lightning didn't stop and chased him into the depths of the ground to strike him. The second lightning was purple gold and also carried a wisp of primal chaos mist. This was rather terrifying. In the Yang realm, the might of this kind of lightning was unimaginably strong. This was lightning that descended specifically for destruction. Chu Feng entered the stone jar at the first possible moment and fastened the lid tightly. That lightning struck the stone jar and slowly faded away. This kind of lightning no longer appeared in the sky above. What's the situation? Isn't the reckoning over yet? I've already become a person from the Yang realm and endured all the Yin energy. How can this kind of thing still happen? Chu Feng had a solemn expression and was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. After he reassembled his true form and looked at his own condition, his face darkened. He had actually almost fallen from the Divine King realm and damaged his evolutionary foundation. He didn't say a word and began to heal his injuries. He only recovered after a full half a month. There were no lingering effects left and he had fully recovered. This body is really not bad. It's full of vigorous vitality. Chu Feng nodded. However, he still didn't understand the situation until now. He couldn't help but recall the various scriptures he had read. When he came over from the Yang realm universe, he had taken all the ancient books of each race and read all of them. In addition, there was also the personal letter who had given him. It was written by a powerhouse from his master, and all the words had flowed through his heart. It can't be coming from my cultivation, right? This time, it wasn't targeting Yin energy, but a newborn infant with cultivation would be suppressed and killed by the rules of heaven and earth? Chu Feng pondered because he had seen similar records. Could it be that this desolate land was guarding against special reincarnators? The strongest personal letter had mentioned a few sentences but didn't go into detail. He had just dealt with the dense Yin energy, and now he wanted to suppress and kill a baby with heaven's cultivation. How could he live? Chu Feng's expression was ugly. Several days later, he couldn't hold it in anymore and ran out again to test and verify. This time, he was very careful and observed the changes and mysteries of heaven and earth. A black bolt of lightning struck and exploded him. He almost didn't escape and his evolutionary foundation was damaged again. Chu Feng's face darkened. He didn't say a word and recovered his body. After studying the strongest personal letter, he believed that this was really targeting reincarnators with the evolutionary foundation of their previous lives. He didn't dare to take any more risk. He would be suppressed and killed if he was careless. That kind of lightning was too terrifying. In general, I'm still not strong enough. The personal letter mentioned that the strongest geniuses have a way to deal with some strange and terrifying lightning tribulations. Chu Feng muttered to himself. He longed to step on his own path and make every realm flawless. At that time, not to mention Crimson Ming, even the top few gods in the world, who were more powerful than him, couldn't cross realms to fight him fiercely. On the path of evolution, I want to become one of the most powerful gods in history. Chu Feng pondered for a long time. From various breathing techniques to the most powerful handwritten books, then to the secret manuals of the domain and the secret arts of the foreign realm, he finally frowned and decided to give it a try. His whole body shone. Then, all kinds of cultivation and energy were restrained and condensed in his stomach. This lasted for several days before his cultivation condensed into a golden core. Chu Feng opened his mouth and spat it out. The golden core was as big as a longan fruit and was covered in complicated runes. It was overflowing with colorful lights and was incomparably divine. This was his cultivation combined with the special techniques, domains, the strongest personal letter, and the breathing techniques of various races. He actually succeeded. This was too important. If someone else swallowed it, he wouldn't have a place to cry. Even if it wasn't the strongest in each realm and had all kinds of flaws, it still represented the fruit of a divine king. He really didn't feel at ease leaving the golden core outside. The current him, after spitting out this golden core surrounded by destructive runes, only had good stamina, but that was only relative to an ordinary infant. One had to know that all his strength was gone. All the cultivation he had evolved was in this golden core decorated with complicated runes. Chu Feng put it back into his body. After some thought, he placed it near the small gray millstone and finally tried to suppress it between the two millstones. In an instant, a hazy mist covered that area. All auras seemed to be completely isolated from the outside world? Chu Feng was suspicious. He really did feel this way. Could it be a misconception? Chu Feng thought about it and came out from the stone jar. He was on guard and unexpectedly, there really wasn't any lightning descending. Even though he was an infant, his physical strength was extremely strong. He crawled to the surface in one go and gazed at the sky. Although dark clouds covered the sky, there was still no lightning striking down. Chu Feng's little mouth cracked open. His baby fat little face was full of smiles. He was incomparably happy. He had completely eliminated all future troubles and could now step onto the path of the strongest. The gray source matter is very strange. It is between the tangible and intangible. Outsiders won't be able to sense it. Chu Feng was quite satisfied. It could conceal everything. His cultivation hadn't been shaved off. It was only temporarily sealed. If there was a need, he could directly release the golden core. Of course, he felt a headache when he thought of the consequences. Unless he was in a desperate situation, he couldn't use it at all. He reckoned that he wouldn't even have the chance to release a single attack. He would be killed by the lightning first. This lump of earth flame is strange. It's not an ordinary thing, but it's useless to me now. I'll study it again when I have the chance. Chu Feng returned underground and brought the stone box with him. He decided to leave this place because there were many traces of lightning strikes here. It would be bad if someone discovered it. However, he was worried. He was too young. Carrying the stone jar with him was too conspicuous. It was impossible not to attract attention even if he didn't want to. In the end, he entered the stone jar and released the golden core. He drove the jar and only stopped after flying several hundred kilometers. This was a mountainous region with a savage aura. Chu Feng discovered some traces of hunters. He hid the stone box and pondered about the future. Rumble. Heavy rain poured down. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The rain was especially heavy in this dark night. At first, Chu Feng was really shocked. He thought he was going to be struck by lightning again, but in the end, he discovered that it was a false alarm. It was just a normal thunderstorm. During the latter half of the night, Chu Feng was horrified and all the hair on his body stood on end. Even though he was no longer a divine king and his cultivation had turned into a golden core, suppressed within the small gray millstone, his intuition was still very sharp. Very soon, he was scared out of his wits. In the heavy rain, there were a few vicious beasts covered in blood and emitting an incomparably bitter aura as they rushed out from the depths of the mountain ridge. Divine King. Chu Feng was astonished. What kind of situation was this? Even in the Yang realm, there shouldn't be a few Divine King level evolvers appearing all at once. Moreover, these were a few wounded vicious beasts. It was even rarer to see them walking together like this. Following that, he saw a woman. She was like a true fairy in the pouring rain as she crossed the vast sky and arrived behind the divine king-level vicious beasts. This woman was too beautiful and outstanding. Her style was peerless. Her white clothes fluttered in the rain and her cold temperament was unforgettable. She was transcendent and looked down on the world. Chapter 10:25. Wah wah wah. On this rainy night, Chu Feng screamed at the top of his lungs, acting like a crying baby. Of course, he didn't cry because this much rain was enough. Otherwise, if he really opened his mouth to laugh or call her fairy, he would probably be picked up and studied thoroughly. It was too abnormal. However, his expression quickly changed. The woman in the fluttering white dress, who looked like a true fairy in the rain, glanced at him and ignored him. Rumble! The earth trembled and the entire mountain range was shaking. Those beasts were more ferocious than the last. Their fur was stained with blood, and it was like an earthquake when they ran over. They were all divine king-level beasts with bodies the size of small mountains. These creatures were considered powerful even in the Yang realm, and were feared by the leaders of the various tribes. Normally, it was rare for the various chiefs to see one in this desolate land. They all lived in the depths of the mountain range. Now, the 5 of them were running side by side. They were drenched in blood as they fled. At this moment, they had their eyes on Chu Feng and were charging towards him. Chu Feng grinned and really wanted to curse. He hadn't attracted that fairy sister and had provoked these divine king-level beasts instead. If he didn't jump up and run, he would be trampled to death. This script wasn't right. Chu Feng had a headache. It was different from what he had imagined. In the wilderness, a peerless fairy with an outstanding temperament and otherworldly temperament saw an abandoned baby. Shouldn't she be kind-hearted and save it? Why wasn't she paying attention to him? Chu Feng was about to jump up and run. Those beasts opened their bloody mouths and stared at him with their lantern-like eyes. Their auras shook the desolate land. It was too terrifying, as if they were going to overturn the 9 heavens. At the crucial moment, that woman still took action. A hazy light enveloped Chu Feng and protected him within. With a swoosh, Chu Feng was guided over to the woman's side. He wasn't trampled by the divine king-level beasts. When he got closer, Chu Feng felt that this woman wasn't simple. Her immortal aura was too strong. Her skin was snow-white and her hair was shiny black. Her eyes were deep and beautiful, as if she was going to ascend with a rain of light. She was like a true immortal. In particular, she was exceptionally beautiful, rarely seen in the world. Her pure white dress fluttered in the rain, making her seem even more detached from the world of mortals. However, she was indeed too cold, even a little apathetic. Chu Feng was pulled to the front by her through the air. He was still thinking about how to act more natural, like an 8-month-old baby. In the end, he discovered that he was floating in front of this exceptional beauty. He couldn't move at all and was suspended there. Meanwhile, this powerful fairy was also observing him. She had an oval face and a lustrous white face that emitted a radiance. Her eyes were rather spirited, but also slightly cold. Especially after noticing Chu Feng's little pung, she frowned. Chu Feng felt a chill between his legs. He almost jumped up and ran away. Being stared at like this, even in his infant form, he still felt uncomfortable. However, before he could think any further, this beautiful woman in white, who looked like she had walked out of a painting, waved her hand and threw him away. F***ck. What was going on? Chu Feng was a little dumbfounded. This was completely different from what he had expected. Wasn't this fairy picking up an abandoned infant and taking him in as a disciple or a younger brother? Why did she throw him away? He really wanted to say that all kinds of legends among the people were unreliable. What fairy mother? What true fairy sister? He shouldn't have believed in these things at all. This was a heartless demoness. How could she casually throw away an infant? In fact, during this process, she didn't even touch Chu Feng. She only glanced at his little pring, and immediately threw him away in disgust. Chu Feng seriously suspected that this demoness in white came from an evolutionary sect where all the sect members were women. Otherwise, why would she despise him and even discriminate against him like this? Was he going to fall to his death? Chu Feng was indignant. Could it be that he had to expose the strength of a divine king-level infant now? However, this woman wasn't simple no matter how he looked at it. She was just a single person, yet she had scared away a few divine king-level vicious beasts. How terrifying was this? Chu Feng seriously suspected that even if he risked being struck by lightning and revealed his strength, he might still be dealt with by this demoness. However, accidents always happened. At the last moment, a pair of soft hands caught her. It was a maid who rushed over from the dark and rainy night and held her in her hands. Miss, this child, unexpectedly, it was the maid of the beautiful fairy in white. She was like a ghost guarding in the darkness and had a tacit understanding with each other. When Chu Feng was thrown in her direction, she caught him. The maid was also very beautiful. She was a rare beauty with a graceful figure and a gentle temperament. She was like a daughter of a noble family and didn't look like a maid at all. His muscles and bones are extraordinary and he has some talent, the white-clothed woman said. Her voice was slightly magnetic and sexy, but also somewhat cold. The young and vigorous maid was astonished. An astonished expression appeared on her beautiful face. An infant that could be said to have talent by the young miss must be extremely astonishing. After all, the young miss she followed had a terrifying background. She was already famous in the primordial world at a young age and was extremely dazzling on the Divine King ranking list. "Miss, do you want to take him in?" the maid asked. Her large eyes flickered with a hopeful expression. This was because she found this child very cute. His large eyes were pure and he didn't cry or make a fuss. He opened his little hands and smiled at her, wanting her to hug him. In an instant she felt touched. She held him in her arms and looked down at the little fellow with a smile. "No, I'll find a tribe or a city and leave him there." The beautiful lady's words made Chu Feng speechless. But in general, it was not bad. At least this demoness didn't say she would leave him in the wilderness. However, before he could let out a sigh of relief, he heard the divine king-level lady say, "It's strange to have this kind of abandoned infant in this barren mountain. I'll search his soul later to take a look." Chu Feng felt that he needed to immerse his spirit in the gray millstone and use it to isolate himself. The special gray substance was between tangible and intangible. Even divine kings couldn't detect it. Crack! Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The dazzling light illuminated the puddles in the mountains. The nearby rocks and mountain ridges seemed extremely oppressive. The appearance of the two women in this rainy night was incomparably mysterious. "All of you go back. Don't go out of this mountain range and harm the nearby tribes. Don't tell anyone that I passed by this place." The fairy in white warned the 5 divine king-level vicious beasts. At this time, the 5 vicious beasts had already prostrated themselves on the ground. They were trembling in fear and couldn't move. How could a creature of this level be like this? They originally reigned supreme over a region, but today they were actually suppressed to this state. One had to know that when they walked in the outside world, they would be feared by various races. They would even be worshipped and offered all kinds of sacrifices. But now, they didn't have any temper because they had seen with their own eyes that this woman had walked out from the Black Domain in the depths of this mountain range. The Black Domain of the Great Wilderness was a land of death. Countless years ago, the gods had joined forces to attack it for many years. It was unknown just how many gods and god-kings had died there. Corpses were everywhere, and it was rumored that even Empyreans had fallen there. That black forest had terrifying energy, making people fearful at the sight of it. No one dared to approach it rashly. "Oh, true fairy of the G-clan, I didn't expect to meet you here. We really are fated." At this time, a man flew over from the rain. He was surrounded by blazing lightning. He crossed the mountain range and landed here. The aura he emitted was more terrifying than those divine king-level vicious beasts combined. Although his aura was strong after landing, he was gentle and refined. He had snow-white hair and a face as white as jade. He smiled and greeted the fairy in white. "Li Jiuxiao, so it was you who followed me. Is it interesting? Do you want to fight me again?" Fairy Ji spoke calmly and confidently. Beside her, the beautiful maid who was carrying Chu Feng said, "Mr. Li, although your name has shaken the great wilderness, you have gone too far in chasing after my young lady. My young lady doesn't like you." Chu Feng's heart was unsettled. This young man seemed to have a great background. It was shocking that he could actually shake the great wilderness. No, it was just a coincidence. At this point, Li Jiuxiao's pupils constricted. He stared at Chu Feng in the pretty maid's arms and asked in surprise, "Who is he?" "Lei Zhenzi," the pretty maid said casually. She wanted to add that this was an abandoned baby, but then she curled her lips and didn't explain. Hearing this, Li Jiuxiao's body shook. Divine light burst out of his eyes. It was even brighter than the lightning in the rainy night. He cried out involuntarily, "What? You Ji Kaixin, true fairy of the Ji-clan, you really gave birth to a Lei Zhenzi?" The beautiful Ji Kaixin in white heard his words. Two terrifying divine rainbows flew out of her beautiful eyes. She stared at him, and a terrifying pressure spread out. "Li Jiuxiao, Mr. Li, what nonsense are you talking about?" The pretty maid scolded angrily. She was very angry, and was reprimanding him on behalf of her young lady. "Before I came here, I asked Celestial Master Li to make a divination. He said that the true fairy of the Ji-clan would enter the Black Realm and give birth to a son named Lei Zhenzi. You really gave birth to a child." Li Jiuxiao cried out in pain. He covered his chest and staggered backward. Then, he was furious. A terrifying divine king aura burst out and almost tore the sky apart. The Celestial Master was a terrifying existence that far surpassed the Divine Master. His divination had always been very accurate. The maid was angry and said, "Nonsense. This is an abandoned baby that we picked up. How can you say that about my young lady? This is slander. Be careful that my old master will overturn your Li clan. If it wasn't for the birth, the problem would be even more serious. The Celestial Master said that we should kill Lei Zhenzi on sight. I guarantee it." Li Jiuxiao panted heavily. The veins on his head were bulging. "This is even more serious than giving birth. What do you want to say?" The maid was indignant and felt injustice for her young lady. As for Ji Kaixin, she directly took action. She raised her hand and a colorful divine rainbow flew out from between her eyebrows. With a destructive aura and complicated runes, it attacked Li Jiuxiao. "Fairy Ji, listen to my explanation," Li Jiuxiao shouted. His expression was ugly as he fought back. At the same time, he was still angry and burst out with boundless divine radiance. In the latter half of the night it was raining cats and dogs. The radiance he emitted caused countless haze to rise. It looked extremely terrifying and shocking. Boom! The two of them exchanged blows. It was as if the sky was shaking. In the rainy night, order interweaved. It was extremely terrifying. Chapter 10:26. When the two of them started fighting, they used at least 3 peerless divine skills in an instant. One of them was the lightning fist. This was indeed the fist technique of the top clans in the Yang realm. For a moment, lightning flashed and thunder roared in this stormy sky. It was a terrifying scene. The two of them fought into the sky and turned into 2 balls of light. One of them was dressed in white, her beauty unmatched in the great wilderness. The other had a head full of disheveled hair, and was full of heroic spirit. She was no longer gentle and elegant as she fought fiercely with her opponent in anger. "Fairy Ji, if he isn't your son, you should kill him," Li Jiuxiao shouted. He was like a demon god in the rainy night, his might oppressive. Chu Feng cursed in his heart. Where did this white-haired brat come from? He actually suggested killing him. He was too despicable. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't move, he would have rushed up and given him a few blows. Ji Kaixin scolded, "Shut up, you have no right to talk about me. Who are you to me? It's not your place to lecture me and tell me what to do." Chu Feng wanted to praise her. It would be best if he could slap this white-haired youth. But he also knew it would be difficult. Both Li Jiuxiao and Ji Kaixin were very strong. Chu Feng was also at the Divine King realm and could feel that these two were ridiculously strong. They didn't seem like evolvers of this realm at all. He further understood that his evolution process was flawed and needed to be perfected. Otherwise, he would be overshadowed by such creatures. The Yang realm was vast and boundless. He had just arrived and was taught a lesson. There was always someone better out there. What he was proud of couldn't be used here. "Fairy Ji, you disappoint me. You're so reluctant. Did you really hide near the black region to give birth?" Li Jiuxiao's voice was trembling. At the same time, he observed Ji Caixuan's reaction. He could see that he was worried about personal gains and losses. He couldn't have a normal state of mind and had already lost his sense of propriety. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost points like this. "Li Jiuxiao, are you trying to start a war by slandering my family?" The maid shouted sternly to protect the reputation of her mistress. Chu Feng was amused, but he put on an obedient look, blinking his big eyes. When the maid lowered her head to look at him, she found him more and more adorable. "Sister." Chu Feng stuck out his tongue and shamelessly tried to get close to her. Because in reality there were babies of this age who knew how to call each other relative. Therefore, he directly opened his mouth and revealed a pure smile. You sound like a baby, so obedient." This pretty maid was happy, extremely happy. She pinched his chubby little face. Chu Feng's face turned red. He really wanted to dig his head into the ground and run away. He still had some sense of shame. However, he had fallen into the enemy's hands and couldn't escape, so he had no choice but to pretend to be pure. "How dare you say that this Leijianzi has nothing to do with you? You're already calling her big sister. Is he your young mistress, child?" Li Jiuxiao was furious. He had chased after the Ji family's fairy for 5 years. His concern caused him to be in a mess. Right now, his face was ashen as he roared loudly. He thought of the mysterious celestial master's words and instantly felt like a knife was being twisted in his heart. His eyes turned red. He really didn't want to be fated with Ji Kaixin. The maid scolded, "You, damn it, saying such nonsense again and again. My young mistress is cold and noble, and she doesn't even bother to explain to you. However, I want to say that even if young Master Li has a high status and is handsome, you shouldn't and don't have the right to say such things." Boom! Li Jiuxiao rushed over. His whole body was covered in lightning runes as he used his lightning fist. The powerful pressure shook the heaven and earth, exploding with boundless lightning. It was extremely frightening. He wanted to kill Chu Feng, who was in the hands of the maid, and kill this Leijianzi. Ji Caixuan's eyes released a light that pierced through the night sky. She used the ultimate secret technique of her race to attack Li Jiuxiao. With a bang, the white-haired youth's body shook violently, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. "You!" Li Jiuxiao retreated. He only wanted to kill Leijianzi, so he didn't pay much attention to Ji Caixuan's attack. In the end, he was at a disadvantage. With a swoosh, Ji Kaixin flew across the sky and stood in front of her maid, blocking Li Jiuxiao's path. "Mother!" Chu Feng shouted from behind. Of course, his voice was very weak, and his pronunciation was not standard. His tum was very obvious. "Ah, pft! It was just a sound, but it made Li Jiuxiao spit out a mouthful of blood. He felt unwell and almost fell from the sky. His body was trembling and his face was pale. Chu Feng stretched out his little hand. That was truly ignorant, naive, innocent, and innocent. It was a subconscious action. He didn't care about that. Since the white-haired kid was determined to kill him, he should quickly provoke him and make him act abnormally. It was safer to kill or chase him away as soon as possible. As for whether Ji Kai-Xian would search his soul, he didn't care now. At most, he could hide his spiritual consciousness in a special gray source to hide from the heavenly secret. Anyway, she had mentioned earlier that she would search his soul. Ah, my heart hurts. Li Jiuxiao looked infatuated and in pain. He staggered back again and again. He was really stimulated to the point that he wanted to die. Ji Kai-Xian turned back and glanced at Chu Feng, making him feel guilty. This woman's beautiful eyes were too deep, and she had extraordinary insight. Was he going to be discovered the moment he arrived in the world of the living? Chu Feng made up his mind to pretend to be innocent. After a while, he would immerse his consciousness in the millstone. Li Jiuxiao, you are too full of yourself. Do you really think that you are the best among the divine kings? You should know that the untainted land is vast and boundless. Even mighty figures can't overlook it. Who would dare to be arrogant? Our so-called fame in the untainted land is actually just a small part of the land. There must be some divine kings who are stronger than you, but you just don't know about them. About you and me. Ji Caishuan's voice was calm, but there was no smile at all. She was lecturing Li Jiuxiao. She had just walked out of the Black Region forest and was in a hurry to return to her clan. She didn't want to be entangled with this terrifying young divine king. Li Jiuxiao said with a hoarse voice, Fairy Ji, if Lei Zhenzi isn't your child, can I bring him to see Celestial Master Li? Why should I? Ji Caishuan's voice was indifferent. Li Jiuxiao said, this is a barren land. Although there are many tribes and few cities, there is something strange about it. I think there is something wrong with this Lei Zhenzi. I want to bring him to the eternal celestial capital and ask Celestial Master Li to see what is going on. Chu Feng was shocked. This white-haired man kept mentioning the Celestial Master. Could it be that he was divined as soon as he arrived in the world of the living? This was not possible. What did Celestial Master Li divined? Ji Kai-Xian asked. Li Jiuxiao's face turned green and white. In the end, he braced himself and said, he asked me to come to the vicinity of the Black Region. He said that if Lei Zhenzi appeared, he would either be your son or my rival in love. The pretty maidservant laughed, her big eyes curved into the shape of a crescent moon. Ji Caishuan's face was blank. However, upon closer inspection, her face turned from white to red and then to black. It was obvious that she wasn't that calm and good-tempered. Then, she exploded again. One after another, the sun, moon, and stars flowed out of her palm. They were all celestial bodies. When they collided with each other, the energy runes that erupted were too terrifying. What I said is true. Celestial Master did say that. Li Jiuxiao's face turned red. He pointed at Chu Feng and said, there is something wrong with this Lei Zhenzi. Chu Feng had an innocent expression. His big eyes were innocent, and he looked adorable. He smiled at him and stretched out his little hand. He mumbled, little brother. The pretty maidservant burst into laughter again. However, Li Jiuxiao's face turned black. He was furious. You call Ji Kai-Xian mother but call me little brother? Stupid kid, this is intolerable. Chu Feng glared at him and continued to smile foolishly. In fact, he didn't want to pay attention to him. He was thinking about this matter in his heart. Listening to the conversation between the three of them, the so-called primitive land seemed to have no end. Even the Almighty couldn't grasp it and no one dared to claim supremacy in the world? and these two people were suspected to be evolvers ranked at the top of the Divine King list. However, they were also suspected to be limited to a certain area and couldn't sweep across the boundless primitive land. Rumble. Suddenly the earth split open. The entire mountain range was trembling. The primitive forest swayed violently, and countless leaves fell. A terrifying aura covered the sky and the earth, affecting the entire rainy night. Then, Chu Feng discovered that there were mountains collapsing and the earth cracking. Wisps of white mist were emitted, and even the torrential rain couldn't extinguish them. They couldn't stop the pure white mist. The entire heaven and earth was filled with a terrifying evil intent and the aura of the immortal Tao. It was shocking and confusing. The ferocious beasts from before were all lying on the ground, trembling in fear and not daring to move. These were ferocious beasts of the Divine King level, but they were frightened to this extent. Chu Feng's young body couldn't help but have goosebumps. He couldn't move and was frozen in place. His heart trembled. What was going on? This was due to the beautiful maidservant's shelter. Otherwise, his situation would be even worse. Then, he saw the earth split open and an egg appeared. It was as big as a millstone and was dark red in color. It was covered in all kinds of complicated patterns. Heavenly egg? Li Jiuxiao cried out in shock. Even his anger and resentment were suppressed. An extraordinary creature's egg has been born? Even Ji Kaixin was surprised. At the same time, even the powerful Li Jiuxiao and her felt the pressure. The atmosphere in this area was somewhat terrifying. They tensed up and became alert. Rumble. A huge mountain collapsed and a rotting bird flapped its huge wings. It covered the sky and appeared. Even the torrential rain was blocked by its wings. Then, with a loud crack, another valley collapsed. A huge heavenly dragon appeared. Its flesh was withered, its wings were rotten, and its eyes were empty. It soared up and blocked the lightning. Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He had just arrived in the world of the living and encountered such an unforeseen event in an ordinary mountain range. It didn't seem right no matter how he looked at it. He originally thought that meeting Li Jiuxiao and Ji Kaixin and seeing their strength was already a lesson for him. Now that he saw that the lesson was a little long and scary, it had just begun. What is this? Is it real? Why do I feel a little strange? It's like a nightmare. Li Jiuxiao whispered. Ji Kaixin felt that the problem was very serious. They seemed to have broken into a special area and offended the owner of this place. It's not a dream. It's something that once existed. Ji Kaixin kept retreating. Chu Feng was scared. He thought of some of the taboos in the world of the living that celestial venerable stone fox had explained to him. This seemingly ordinary mountain range was not simple at all. It might be the hibernation of some existence. Chapter 10:27. This wasn't a good place. It was full of dangers and contained great calamities. This was what Stone Fox had told him. He had mentioned some things to take note of in the Yang realm. The famed mountains and great rivers of the Yang realm couldn't be rashly entered. If one were to enter, one must keep a low profile and not stir up trouble. That was because there were many strange things in the famed mountains. If an ultimate expert was in seclusion or hibernating, there would definitely be ultimate domains left behind. Additionally, there were some famed mountains with terrifying natural terrains containing the boundless mysteries of heaven and earth. Once activated, it was enough to bury gods and devils. Even the celestial venerables had fallen in such special terrains. But this wasn't a famed mountain. It was just a desolate mountain range. How could there be such special terrains or ultimate domains that had been activated? This mountain range could be considered a barren and barbaric land. It wasn't one of those famed mountains and great rivers that had shaken the world. Chu Feng felt a chill run down his spine. He had a bad premonition. Through some subtle observations, He sensed that this place was similar to the terrifying and bizarre region mentioned by the celestial venerable stone fox. Moreover, he himself was a domain researcher. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this place was strange. It could only be said that they had struck the jackpot. This place wasn't famous, but it contained terror all the same. Otherwise, the corpses of the sky dragon and phoenix wouldn't have appeared after the earth split open. There was even a heavenly egg. It's fine if there's a terrifying terrain, but please don't let any living creatures lie in ambush. Chu Feng prayed in his heart. White mist rose up from the mountain range. All kinds of phenomena appeared, making it seem increasingly evil and terrifying. However, there was still a trace of an immortal aura. Beast roars rang out and bird cries reverberated through the firmament. It became increasingly terrifying as terrifying great Tao fragments appeared in the void to suppress and kill the creatures of the 8 desolate lands. Some of them are formed from energy while others are physical objects. For example, the dragon corpse. Ji Kaixin spoke with a solemn expression on her beautiful face. At this time, the phoenix swooped down. Both she and Li Jiuxiao turned pale as they descended. That giant bird spread its rotten wings and blocked the torrential rain. It carried terrifying runes and emitted a black light as if it had broken through space from hell. Its momentum was terrifying. Qi. At the crucial moment, Li Jiuxiao took out a bone token. This was the token of an expert. He tossed it into the sky, and it immediately shone with 7-colored light, accompanied by chaotic air. This was a formidable keepsake, a mysterious treasure, unexpectedly able to stop that rotting undying bird. However, the silhouette of a dragon broke the silence. The enormous body of the heavenly dragon intertwined with the lightning that filled the sky. It suddenly swooped down as if it wanted to destroy the world. Ji Caixuan's face turned pale, and she immediately took out a picture scroll that emitted a myriad of auspicious lights to resist the heavenly dragon's corpse. There were many words and a large seal on the picture scroll, and it was personally left behind by a certain terrifying existence. Chu Feng muttered to himself as he watched. No matter if it was the white-haired brat or the Ji clan's fairy, they both had backup plans. They had great killing weapons bestowed upon them by their clansmen. Their current strength was hard to estimate. At this time, countless colorful halos floated in the void. Each of them contained all the phenomena of the mortal world, and they were all old events from ancient times. Li Jiuxiao and Ji Caixuan's expressions were very ugly. They were shocked to discover that this area might be even more terrifying than they had imagined. There were other mysteries. The colorful halos contained some terrifying events that had happened in ancient times. For example, the one who had slain the heavenly dragon in the sky was the one who had slain it. It was a heroic youth who had slain a heavenly dragon alone. It was shocking. In another halo, the youth discovered the undying bird and fought fiercely with it. They fought fiercely, overturning the sea of lava and breaking open the sky. Other than that, there was also the terrifying heavenly tribulation of the youth becoming a celestial venerable. It was also flashing in the halo. It was truly terrifying. There were also some trivial matters. For example, he wasn't outstanding when he was young, but in the end, he rose to power and looked down on a part of the primordial world, becoming a venerable ancestor. In these halos, no matter what happened, there would be the same person talking about his experiences in ancient times. However, they were all very vague and intermittent. Li Jiuxiao felt somewhat bitter. Clearly, there were still living beings in this terrain. The sleeping person hadn't died and was still in this world. There were terrifying living beings in this special terrain. This was the most troublesome thing. If one provoked it and woke it up, only heaven knew what would happen. Chu Feng was also troubled. Celestial Venerable Stone Fox had said that some living terrifying beings had been hibernating for thousands of years and had occupied a part of the land in prehistoric times. Therefore, some famous mountains and great rivers were feared and people didn't dare to touch them. Had they hit the jackpot? This place wasn't famous at all, but it could actually produce such terrifying beings in history. Even Ji Kai-shin was speechless. Her face was pale and she felt that she was going to be in big trouble. Pop! Some halos were cracking and all kinds of tyrannical energy rushed out. They were all shocked and quickly retreated, using scrolls and dominoes to block. Oh no! Chu Feng was sure that there were not only living beings in this area, but they had also encountered an extreme situation. The sleeping person here was about to die. This being could no longer control its body, and could collapse at any time. Normally speaking, some powerful beings wouldn't necessarily kill everyone even if they were woken up. They might be merciful and maintain their bearing. However, the ancient being here was walking towards the end of its life. To be more precise, its consciousness was in a mess and it was emitting a spiritual domain that covered the mountains and rivers. The sky dragon and phoenix corpses they saw now were everything that the ancient being had experienced. Now it was manifesting and targeting everyone. This was no longer controllable. Whether it lived or died depended on luck. This powerful being at the end of its life was emitting a weak spiritual domain that was evolving on its own. No one could guess what would happen. To be more precise, they had entered the final dreamland of this being and were now trapped in this special domain. Chu Feng's heart turned cold. This was the worst-case scenario that Celestial Venerable Stone Fox had mentioned. Bang! At this time, earth and rocks flew everywhere and the mountains collapsed. Magma surged tens of thousands of meters high and connected with the thunder and lightning in the sky, forming a dazzling brilliance that illuminated the mountains and rivers. The pouring rain was evaporated on a large scale, but the night sky quickly darkened again. Thunder and lightning gathered, and the rain poured down once again. One could see that a giant fish had appeared out of nowhere and was floating in the air. It was incomparably huge and brought with it an even more violent rain. It was as if it was about to turn this place into an ocean. Kuan! Li Jiuxiao shouted. It was a strange wild beast. This thing could also transform into a ping and evolve into a complete form. That was the Kuan Ping, soaring between the 33 heavens and sweeping through all enemies. It was incomparably terrifying. Now, it was roaming around here. A casual flick of its tail would cause a torrential downpour. In addition, it had also pierced through many spatial nodes that were connected to unknown areas. This might be our only chance of survival. Let's escape from these spatial nodes and split up, Ji Kai-shin said. In reality, this corn had already made a choice for them. It opened its mouth and spat out bubbles that turned into spatial bubbles. It sucked them in one by one and let them scatter and drift in the void. Even Chu Feng was separated. His scalp was really numb. This was the first lesson he had encountered in the world of the living. Even a barren mountain could be like this. It would even alarm an ancient almighty who was on the verge of death. It was too speechless. He might die here. At the same time, he was also sighing. This was only the weakest dream of the existence under the mountains. Even a remnant domain could be like this, evolving into a Kuan and controlling the heavenly dragon and phoenix. It was truly terrifying. The few of them fled for their lives, and no one could care about anyone else. Chu Feng was glad that he didn't suffer from the pressure of the supreme energy in the bubble. It was very peaceful inside. The other three could clearly see that the silly child was acting strangely. He was actually tossing and turning in the bubble and hurrying with a goal. This bubble space was very strange. It was transparent and would roll with a little force. He was heading toward the direction where he buried the stone jar. Perhaps only that ultimate treasure could help him now. Li Jiuxiao's eyes were blank. He saw Lei Zhenzi's little arms and legs flailing about. He ran away just like that? He really did run away. Goodbye, I'll find you in 18 years and be your love rival. No, 13 years is enough. Chu Feng waved his little hand and shouted. F***ck. Li Jiuxiao was furious. However, he didn't have the chance to explode. He drifted toward a spatial node and was about to enter it. There was no turning back. Hey, see you in 13 years. Chu Feng waved at the beautiful maid and Ji Kaixin on the other side. The two of them were about to enter the spatial node along with the bubble. Ji Kaixin stared at him with her brows raised and her eyes sharp. The beautiful maid was in a daze and looked at him in a daze. What was going on? This milk baby was a monster? The three of them disappeared. Chu Feng approached the area where he buried the stone jar. After the bubble touched the stone jar, it couldn't block the jar and easily entered. Chu Feng hid in the jar immediately. Go! He released the energy of a divine king from within the sealed stone jar. He controlled the jar and moved as fast as lightning, fleeing into the distance. He traveled hundreds of thousands of kilometers in a single go. Even the dream realm of that great figure couldn't stop him. That weak domain was pierced through by him. After Chu Feng escaped danger, he drove the stone jar again and traveled hundreds of thousands of miles before stopping. Sigh, I have one more love rival and one less mother. Is this a loss or an advantage? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.